The Lord of Mages, I ruined the tech tree. This video is purely for entertainment and does not infringe on copyrights or laws. The rights to the novel and image belong to the original author. We do not claim ownership. Don't like waiting and want to listen to this fanfic in full now? Subscribe to our Patreon, where you'll find the best fanfics. Chapter 126 Antolia, Prenatal Education for Everyone. Leon felt that Matthews had some PTSD, or post-traumatic stress disorder. He didn't know what kind of warmth the harmonious and friendly Antolian people had made the priest feel during these days. However, Leon saw that he was just going through the motions. No matter what Matthews said, the church in Antolia, no, it was the pantheon under the guise of a church, which had to be built, and it couldn't be sloppy at all. So when Matthews walked out of Leon's lord's castle, he seemed to be a little confused. This was not because happiness came too suddenly, but because Leon's transformation was too drastic. In just a few months, the young lord had changed from the noble who shouted that he had to pull the gods out first to pay the tithe to a believer who seemed to be extremely devout to the gods. Matthews couldn't even imagine that if even a noble like Leon, who was in a high position, had no reverence for the God of Light, then where would the future of the church lead to? However, this was just a thought. Compared to the lofty and illusory God of Light, after walking out of Leon's lord's castle, Matthews suddenly realized another possibility. Since his personal power could not change the Antolians' views on the church, and it was even more impossible to spread the gospel of the God of Light in this land with extremely mixed religious beliefs, then, why didn't he join in? If you can't beat them, join them. You know, in the very short meeting that just ended, Leon drew a grand blueprint for a huge church for him. Because Leon deliberately ignored the description of the pantheon, what appeared in Matthews' mind was an unprecedented and magnificent grand building. For Matthews, this is a political achievement. The future of the church is too far away from him. He only knows that if the church described by Leon is really built, then his position will have to move up, at least he will be a regional bishop. This is a mutually beneficial thing, and it is also the first good news that Matthews has heard after experiencing the hard life in Antolia. He has awakened. The construction of the new city is undoubtedly a huge project. The construction of the new city requires sufficient stone and wood, which requires the acceleration of the development and construction of the mining town and the Black Pine Forest area. The mined stone and wood need to be transported over long distances, which requires the paving of roads to the southwest highlands and the eastern woodlands, and the paving of roads requires sufficient cement, which means that the Gloom slime factory needs to be expanded and increased immediately. So, although the construction of the new city has not yet officially begun, it has already created a large number of jobs for Antolia. Fortunately, Antolia has a ready-made path to follow, which is the production team and work point system proposed by Leon last year. Those refugees who were packed and brought back from all over the kingdom by Antolia's militia mercenaries were divided into hundreds of production teams according to the number of people in the region, and each took on part of the task of building the new city. On the third day after León Ximena, the Marquess of Antolia, officially released the plan to build the new city, the entire Thorn territory had become a huge construction site. The existence of the work point system provides the premise and basis for the evaluation and assessment of the production teams, so that the labor of the workers can be quantified and calculated. Leon pointed out in the outline for the construction of the new city of Antolia, trial, that the supervision committee composed of Antolia militia and officials will fully evaluate the efficiency of each team, and will reward the most efficient production team with need and extra work points. The civilians of this era are indeed ignorant, but not stupid. They may not understand the calculation of work points, but they can smell the aroma of hot broth with their noses. It is precisely because of this that these refugees, who were extremely inefficient in the past, competed to burst out with amazing efficiency on this land belonging to the Ximena family. There are work points to earn and food to eat. For the refugees who usually only have clear soup, this is undoubtedly a great temptation. At Leon's reminder, Aaron also took this opportunity to require the refugees living in the settlements to join the production team only if they registered as Antolia residents, so as to promote the implementation of Antolia's household registration policy. In short, everything is moving in a good direction. Even Leon was able to take this opportunity to personally plan the new city that will be born on the west bank of the White Blade River. In the plan of this young lord, the first thing to be built is the living area of the residents centered on the pantheon. Those refugees who came from all over the kingdom can't always live outside the city of Thorn territory. Finding a fixed place for them to live quickly can make the refugees integrate into Anatolia as soon as possible. Under Leon's special instructions, schools are also included in the first batch of construction. As for the so-called school, there are actually no various courses at all. There are only 2 courses currently offered, that is, reading and writing. Although this cannot improve the cultural level of the Anatolians, which is only the level of prenatal education in a short period of time, it is an indispensable investment for the future of Anatolia. Teach children during the day and adults at night. One school serves 2 purposes and operates efficiently. However, since there are too few people who can read and write in this land, although the school has not yet been built, Leon has already begun to screen candidates for teachers. Whether it is the locals of Anatolia or the refugees who have moved from outside, all must be recorded. Even if they can only write or read intermittent phrases, that is enough. At present, Anatolia is not so particular. It is purely for literacy. Moreover, in order to fully take care of the relatives of Anatolia's soldiers, especially the descendants of Anatolia who died on the battlefield, Anatolia Marcus León Ximena specifically ordered that all descendants of fallen soldiers can be directly enrolled, and all Antolia's soldiers' families are given priority. Whether they can learn well or not, at least let the soldiers have enough thoughts and hopes. You know, Aaron, the butler of Anatolia, made it clear that only Anatolia who can read and write will have the qualifications to become Anatolia officials and Marcus attendants. This will undoubtedly become a precious opportunity for countless Anatolians to achieve class transition. This is not only a small step for Leon, but also a big step for Anatolians to achieve cultural victory. The author had some emergencies and dealt with them temporarily. Today, there is only this chapter. I'm sorry, I will find time to make up for it next week. Definitely. Chapter 127 Pike and Salt Lake. If there are 3 major issues that need to be resolved in Anatolia at the moment, then the preparation for the construction of a new city and the registration of all people are undoubtedly the 2 most important ones. As the responsibilities of each production team are gradually clarified, the registered population of Anatolia has also increased sharply. This land in the south of the kingdom has finally returned to the fast lane of rapid development in half a month after Leon's return. This is by no means because Aaron did not do his best when Leon went north. It is purely because many things require Leon to make a decision in person, and this also makes Leon miss the extremely fast communication method in the previous life. Although this world has the existence of magical elements, sending letters and sending messages is still the most common and one of the few ways of communication in this era. As for when Leon was on the northern expedition, any order he issued would inevitably be delayed and lag in order to be implemented in Anatolia. As everything around the Thorn territory began to become well organized again, Leon was finally able to turn his attention to the land southwest of the Thorn territory, the Southwest Highlands. There is a pink lake on the Southwest Highlands. Long before Leon went north to fight, Andrew, the commander of the Lapric Legion, reported this amazing discovery to Leon truthfully. However, the situation was already quite tense at the time, and the Duke of Galicia asked all his vassals to prepare for war as soon as possible, which delayed Leon's pace to the Southwest Highlands again and again. The soldiers of Anatolia were also stationed around the lake under Leon's orders to guard against the tall bird colonies that had not yet been cleared. In fact, at the beginning, for the defenders stationed around the lake, this was just an ordinary and even boring task, until the arrival of midsummer. When the scorching sun of midsummer finally penetrated the thick clouds and sprinkled on the barren plateau of the Southwest Highlands without any shade, the tall bird, which originally had a very strong sense of territory, seemed to suddenly change its temperament. These creatures, which originally came in groups of 3 or 5, seemed to have abandoned their innate sense of territory and rushed towards the Pink Lake, and even had several extremely fierce conflicts with the soldiers of Anatolia. However, since Leon had just received the order from King Wilbert I of Andal and was on his way to the Stream Castle, Aaron, the chief steward of the Ximena family, took the initiative to suppress the matter so as not to affect Leon's mind and interfere with Leon's judgment on the war in the north. After all, although most of the elite soldiers of Anatolia went north with Leon, the soldiers left in Anatolia were not weak at all. These Anatolians, who had long been accustomed to fighting wild monsters, not only did not lose in several encounters, but also successfully ensured the stability of the mining town on the Southwest Highlands and ensured the smooth mining of iron ore, warm stone ore and other minerals. And now, with the return of Leon, a series of situations about the Southwest Highlands were naturally placed on Leon's desk by Aaron. Based on the current situation, the change of the tall-legged bird may be related to the fish in the lake. Aaron gave a conservative and vague statement. Because according to Aaron's description and the images drawn on the croft paper by the soldiers of Anatolia, whether the creatures living in the lake are fish or not is actually a matter of consideration. At least on the croft paper spread on Leon's desk, a creature with a slightly strange appearance is drawn. How to say it? They do have fish scales, and have very common fins, tails and bodies. However, the head of this monster looks a bit dog-like, or to put it more directly, it has a miniature version of a wild dog's head, which is really ugly. The reason why the tall-legged birds gather around this lake is to take advantage of their long legs to go deep into the lake and prey on these strange fish with a slightly ugly appearance. Are you sure there are such guys living in that pink lake? Although Leon had already accepted Aaron's judgment in his heart, he was still somewhat reluctant in his heart. Why do all the creatures in Anatolia look so ugly? Exclamation mark. Where are the griffins? Where are the elves? Where are those creatures that are very common in the fantasy world? Why can other travelers who travel through the alien world set up the Griffin Knights and become friends of the elves, but when they come to him, the creatures he sees are all strange fish with dog heads and fish bodies, and those fang-bearing plateau hounds? Very sure. Facing Leon's doubts, Aaron's face also looked a little helpless. But the fact is the fact. Before Leon arrived at the territory, the soldiers of Anatolia even caught a strange fish and sent it to him. If it weren't for the fact that this thing would stink easily if left for too long, and it would also easily pollute the eyes of his own lord, Aaron would have left a few for Leon to see. Nowadays, the soldiers stationed in the southwest highlands call those strange fish pike. The fish is as its name suggests. Hearing this, Leon nodded reluctantly. It doesn't matter whether it is a pike or not. What Leon is most concerned about is actually the lake itself located in the southwest highlands. You know, it is a pink lake. As a traverser with an online knowledge level, Leon knows very well what a pink lake means. Chaka Salt Lake, Tuz Salt Lake, Savash Salt Lake, Hut Lagoon. Which of these famous salt lakes on Earth in the previous life is not pink? This can be supported by empirical research. Once the salinity of the lake water exceeds that of the seawater, then under high temperature and sufficient light, the algae in the lake will begin to accumulate red beta-carotene, turning the lake pink, and a large number of halophilic algae, halophilic bacteria and highly enriched salt shrimps can easily create this pink natural wonder. That's salt. It is a commodity and resource that is extremely valuable in any era. Therefore, Leon's focus has never been on the pike itself, but on the existence of this strange creature. What kind of impact will it have on this lake, and what kind of obstacles will it cause to Anatolia's future development of the Salt Lake? I'll go to the southwest highlands myself, Leon said in a deep voice, closing the ugly picture on the table. Chapter 128, The Anatolian Navy of the Seven Warlords of the Sea. In Leon's view, salt is not only a commodity, but also an extremely precious strategic resource. No one can live without salt. It is by no means a common condiment, but also an inevitable requirement for maintaining the body's water balance, acid-base balance and body fluid circulation. In the Western countries of the Middle Ages in the previous life, not being allowed to eat salt for a month was a seemingly harmless but actually extremely dangerous punishment. It ranged from loss of appetite and weakness in the limbs to muscle cramps, blurred vision and even accelerated heart rate. Weak limbs. For the Anatolians, especially hunters and mercenaries, whose living environment is already extremely harsh, this is undoubtedly a very fatal point. Therefore, buying salt in other noble territories has always been a huge expense for Anatolia, and the amount of money spent is not even inferior to Anatolia's previous expenditure on buying food. Now that Leon has seen the hope of making Anatolia a salt-producing area in the southwestern highlands, he naturally dares not be careless. After hastily explaining to Aaron the follow-up work points of the new city construction and household registration compilation, he immediately dragged Andrew and rushed all the way to the southwest heights. To be honest, the progress of road construction in Anatolia is quite gratifying. Because with a continuous expansion of the mining town and the operation of the iron smelting workshop adjacent to the southwest highlands, the road connecting the Thorn territory and the southwest highlands undoubtedly has the highest construction priority among many roads. And these cement roads paved with grim slime are extremely friendly to war horses. Not only will they not damage the horse's hooves, but even the speed when riding is also quite eye-catching. However, the further it extends to the southwest, the more difficult it is to build the road. Especially when passing through the mountains and forests on the edge of the Southwest Highlands, not only do you need to cut down the trees along the way first, but the gradually rising altitude also brings higher difficulties to the road construction of the Antillians. But even if the road is not yet completed, León only took less than a day to reach the mining town on the edge of the Southwest Highlands. Although when León last arrived at this land, it was just a barren wasteland, but after only a few months, a row of houses had already appeared in front of León. When they saw the flag symbolizing the Marquess of Antolia, León Ximena, appearing outside the town, all the officials of the mining town hurriedly trotted all the way to gather in front of León. Fernand Bello. Andrew pointed to the middle-aged man standing in the first place and introduced him to León. This man responded to the call of the Marquess during the Highland Hound attack and became an Antolia militia, but unfortunately he was injured in the battle to eliminate the tall bird and lost his left hand. I saw that he was smart and reliable, so after leaving the Southwest Highlands and following the Marquess to the north, I handed this place over to him to take care of. I have reported this to you, and even Butler Aaron called him a rare talent. I remember him. León nodded with satisfaction. In this land called Antolia, there are not many high-quality talents who can serve as administrative managers, and Fernand Bello, who came from the military, is definitely one of them. Not only is he capable, but he is also steady enough. Hello, Lord Marquess. Bello's expression was slightly excited. Although as a member of the Antolia militia in the past, Bello had seen León from a distance, but that was just a distant observation. And now, his own marshal is right in front of him, with a sharp face and so handsome. How can he not be excited? Take me to the lake to take a look. León gave the purpose of his trip very straightforwardly. León is quite satisfied with the current development of the mining town, and Bello's management ability is obviously good. Indeed, the middle-aged man in front of him, like most people in Antolia, can't read a single word, but this has not affected his ability to manage the town in an orderly manner. Obviously, a large part of Bello's talent lies in his own management ability. Understood. Although he had become the manager of the mining town, Bello still habitually gave León a standard military salute. The distance between the Pink Lake and the mining town was not far, and the warhorse under his crotch gave everyone a speed-up buff. When the evening sunset slanted over the land, the lake in the middle of the highlands was right in front of them. The dim sunset dyed the vast lake with a gradient color, like a pool of light pink petals scattered on the earth, spreading from the distant lake to the surroundings. The golden light and the pink lake water converged together, which could not help but bring a bit of dreamy color to this place. However, León at this moment had no time to appreciate the beauty of this moment. There were only two things in his mind, one was pike and the other was salt. There was no need to elaborate on how useful salt was, but León still knew nothing about what pike was. Therefore, the purpose of León's trip was not only to determine the feasibility of salt drying, but also to catch a few pike and bring them back, so that the scientific instruments that had been silent for a long time could play their role. Where are the pike? Most of them gather at the bottom of the lake. If it weren't for those tall birds that only ate warm stones in the past coming to the lake to find food, we might not have been able to find these fish living at the bottom of the lake. Bello answered truthfully, for this reason, the mining town has specially selected several militiamen with good water skills to form a surface patrol team. After that, Bello pointed to one side of the lake. There were not only a few simple barracks there, but also a very simple wooden boat moored on the lake. Wow! How long has it been since I last came here? The Antolians, who are very proactive, have even set up a navy? Exclamation mark. 7 people. How did the Marquess know? Bello couldn't help but widen his eyes and looked at his lord in shock. Even though León is the highest commander of the Antolian army, he has just returned after all. In a remote place like the Southwest Highlands, the transfer of a few soldiers does not need to be reported to the higher levels. But his lord actually knew everything about the Southwest Highlands, which really made Bello feel inexplicably shocked. Hearing this, the corners of León's mouth twitched. How come the navy configuration under his command looks much simpler than the Mongolian navy of the 7 warlords of the sea? I suddenly feel that the pace has been a little slow in recent days. Thanks to Novel Love Book and Zuji for the reward. At the end of the year, everyone will be given a box of pike to take home. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelis. There you'll find the original version of this story, and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 129, Tall Bird, Excellent Miner of Anatolia. Beauty is divided into two types. One is inner beauty, and the other is outer beauty. Leon used to be a face lover, but now, Leon feels that inner beauty is also particularly important. For example, pike is a creature with inner beauty, especially after being roasted on charcoal. For the 7 Anatolian Navy soldiers stationed by the lake, the handling of pike is already very skillful. The most important thing is to chop off the ugly and dirty dog head with an axe. As for the remaining cooking methods and processing methods, in fact, there is no difference from other fish. Probably because the skin of pike is covered with a layer of fat that is just right. Under the charcoal roasting, it exudes a heartwarming burnt aroma. Crisp on the outside and tender on the inside, the aroma is overflowing. After entering the mouth, the first thing you feel is the crispy skin of the fish. Then, as the taster's teeth penetrate the skin, the elastic and tender fish meat will instantly be bounced into the mouth, firm and delicate, with a hint of charcoal roasted aroma, which can't help but make people's lips and teeth fragrant and endless aftertaste. Perhaps because the pike grows in the salt lake, the grilled fish itself does not need any dipping sauce to season it. The slight saltiness even has a slight aftertaste. In short, it is so authentic. Even Leon, the Marquis of Anatolia, couldn't help but eat 3 grilled fish in a row. Pike is a good thing. Leon wiped the corners of his mouth, which were slightly shiny, and was in a good mood. You know, for the Anatolians living inland, fish dishes are not without, but they are extremely rare. Even though the White Blade River flows by the side of the Thorn territory, the fish in the river always have a hard to get rid of earthy smell. But pike is completely different. Although it looks ugly and is not a sea fish, its taste is the most delicious Leon has ever seen. Even compared with a puffer fish in the previous life, the taste is not worse. It tastes really good, but the temper is very bad. Taking advantage of the meal, the soldier next to him became more familiar with his lord and said boldly, "These guys have a temper almost as bad as the plateau hounds. Whenever we row on the lake, they will hit the boat violently with their heads, as if they want to tear the boat apart." Fortunately, the craftsmen of Anatolia are skilled enough to build wooden boats. Before the pikes smash the wooden boats apart, they can knock themselves unconscious. At that time, we can directly pick up fish from the lake with fishing nets. Won't bite people. Leon frowned and bit off a big mouthful of fish meat viciously. In Leon's eyes, this pink lake is an extremely important salt production area in Anatolia in the future. If these pikes bite humans, it will undoubtedly be a big disaster. After all, for the tall-legged strange birds with long legs, the Anatolians can still use the flying stone rope to carry out targeted elimination, but for the dogfish whose teeth are sharp enough to bite through the fishing nets, the Anatolians are somewhat helpless. No, no. The Navy soldier on the side shook his head hurriedly, and said with some laughter, "Some time ago, someone accidentally fell into the lake, but those originally aggressive dogfish almost fled in the blink of an eye." From some angles, the personalities of these dogfish are actually very similar to dogs. When they are tied with a rope, they provoke everywhere and look arrogant, but if the rope is released, they will immediately be as well behaved as the young birds of the tall-legged birds. Adult tall-legged strange birds are indeed a bit fierce, and they will even peck at people when they see them under the drive of territorial consciousness, but those young birds are obviously not the case. Since the parents of the young birds had been killed by the Anatolians, the plump young birds were raised by the Anatolians almost from the moment they hatched. Since Leon intended to tame the talbirds, the people below naturally had to do their best. Although we don't know what the final result will be, at least from the current point of view, the taming process is quite smooth. Even some fast-growing young birds have begun to work with the Anatolian miners. Their sharp and hard beaks are far better than any existing mining tools in Anatolian. With just a light peck, the originally hard rock layer will be torn open. The price that the Anatolians have to pay is just 3 meals a day for the young birds. This is a good job with food and accommodation. Not only does it allow them to have a job from a young age, but it also greatly saves the manpower and material resources of Anatolian. So even though the presence of those tall-legged young birds made many miners quite panicked at the beginning, as time went by, they had already gotten used to those alternative colleagues wandering around the mine. That's good. Leon, who finally breathed a sigh of relief, couldn't help but take a few bites of fish meat and said seriously, "One more." After eating the pike, the rest is to dry the salt. And this obviously takes a long time and requires a lot of manpower. But as an excellent time traveler who has won the title of 3 good students in his high school class for 3 consecutive years, León still has some insights into some of the simplest and most basic chemical knowledge. In combination with the current development status of the salt industry in this era, Bello, who was just promoted to the executive mayor of the mining town by León, only needs a little advice, and he is enough to take on this job. You know, the Southwest Highlands is really a treasure land for drying salt. Not only is there sufficient sunlight, but the daily wind is also strong, which perfectly meets the various conditions required for drying salt. All you need to do is dig enough salt pools by the lake, and then divide them into evaporation pools and crystallization pools according to the established steps. When the sunlight, wind and other natural conditions are met, it only takes 3 or 2 days for the brine to form a layer of coarse salt at the bottom of the pool. After that, it is the well-known steps of making refined salt from coarse salt. What about water injection and dissolution? What about filtering and boiling? Regardless of whether it is already available in this era or those steps that are far beyond the cognition of this era, León has already explained them all to Bello. If this salt lake in the Southwest Highlands cannot provide Anatolia with sufficient salt after having detailed procedures and annotations, then León will really have to reconsider Bello's ability to do things. Don't worry, Marcus. In response to the expectations of his lord, Bello patted his chest and guaranteed, "I will definitely do this properly. Let Anatolia spend less money on purchasing salt." Chapter 130. You call this a barren land? Exclamation mark. When leaving the Southwest Highlands, León took away 2 large baskets of dogfish. This thing is everywhere in the lake. Basically you can get as much as you want. The delicious taste makes León unforgettable. When he returns to the Thorn territory, he can also open his vassals' eyes at the banquet. Yes, banquet. As the highest-ranking noble in the southern part of the kingdom, León naturally wants to meet his vassal since he has returned to the south. Although everyone has basically become familiar with each other during the process of going north to quell the rebellion, the procedures should still be followed and the banquets should still be held. As the saying goes, a new official takes 3 fires when he takes office, not to mention the noble title of Marcus that can be inherited from generation to generation. Moreover, for many nobles, this upcoming banquet may be their first time to set foot in Anatolia, to be the land located in the southernmost part of the kingdom. Or to be more precise, this must be their first time in León Anatolia. Which noble would have nothing to do and come to the border of the kingdom, also known as the wilderness, to find excitement. Therefore, as the Marquis of Anatolia and the host, León naturally had to take this opportunity to show off his style as the largest noble in the south of the kingdom. Be low-key when you should be low-key, and be flamboyant when you should be flamboyant. Although the soldiers of Anatolia are enough to make the people in the south of the kingdom tremble, the strength in other aspects should also be displayed. Because after all, with the end of the civil war in the Andal kingdom, the days when military strength was most valued have passed quietly. All kinds of banquets, songs and dances, and the luxurious life that the nobles are accustomed to have returned again. Even Anatolia, with its superior military strength, would never use military force to intimidate its vassals. This is the unspoken rule that the nobles abide by, and it is definitely not something that León can break at this time. As the carriage of the Earl of Greywater Castle slowly entered the land of Anatolia, the thoughts in the Earl's mind became more and more confused and chaotic. It must be said that compared to the nobles who went north with León, the Earl of Greywater Castle was actually the most confused one. Because his body was a little too round, even the armor was a little hard to wear, so the Earl had to send his son, Cornwayne, to follow León and embark on the journey to the north to quell the rebellion. He was very glad of his decision. His son returned safely, and the honor and reward were successfully obtained. The only thing that was a little different from his original expectation was the final outcome of the civil war. The Duke of Galicia, Michael Bravis, died. The third Prince Helson was missing. The Duke of Sadwin Castle, Pearl, was under house arrest in the capital, and the throne of Wilbert I was extremely stable. The most important and shocking thing to him was the young Viscount whose fiefdom was located south of Greywater Castle. The Ximena family, who had been eating dirt on the border of the kingdom for many years, actually jumped up and directly crossed the title of Earl to become the Marquis of Anatolia, becoming the highest-ranking noble in the southern part of the kingdom. And he, the Earl of Greywater Castle, Eli Wayne actually became the vassal of that young man. Angry? Annoyed? Unwilling? No, although the Earl of Greywater Castle's thoughts were extremely messy, the valuable thing was that he had always been very clear about his own way and could see the situation of the kingdom clearly. Otherwise, he would not have let go of his previous grudges and let his own son follow Leon to the war. Compared to those false names, Eli Wayne always valued interests the most. Therefore, at this moment, he was even a little fortunate for his previous choice. Yes, in the process of following Leon to the north, the nobles in the south of the kingdom did contribute. But the Wayne family was the first to turn to Leon. Even before the war officially broke out, the fat Earl forcibly wiped out the grudges in his heart and handed over the command of the Greywater Castle militia with both hands. As the surrounding scenery began to gradually change, the fat Earl couldn't help but lift the curtain of the carriage and looked around curiously. Although Greywater Castle and Antolia are closely adjacent, this is his first time here. Large tracts of moon mushrooms are growing vigorously on both sides of the road. The pale yellow caps block the scorching sun above, bringing some shade to this winding road. Is the moonlight velvet woven from these trees? Yes. Calendar Wayne on the side was stunned for a moment, and then nodded as if he understood. Although Antolia's looms and process are top secret, Leon has never concealed the raw materials for weaving moonlight velvet. Even the nobles who are not very well informed know how much income the Antolians have obtained from these moon mushroom trees. Anyway, these moon mushroom trees are only available in Antolia. Unless someone can defeat the Antolian army, no matter how jealous they are of the income from the moonlight velvet, they cannot break the monopoly of the Antolians. And the only thing they can do is to try to get a share of the sale of moonlight velvet. In fact, the Count of Greywater Castle did intend to do so. As the noble closest to Antolia, Eli Wayne was well aware of the unique locational advantages of Greywater Castle. Since the rise of the Ximena family was unstoppable, it would be a great choice to join them as soon as possible. After all, relying solely on the power of the Antolians, it was impossible to transport those precious silks to all parts of the kingdom. Even if Leon had reached an agreement with the nobles in the west of the kingdom, how could the nobles in the west take up such a huge market? But soon, when the Count of Greywater Castle's convoy passed through the vast moon mushroom forest, the scenery in front of him suddenly became clear. Then, the fat Count no longer had the mind to think about those messy trivialities. Because what was presented to him was by no means a barren land. Under the joint action of the black soil generation technique and the land compactor, the land of Antolia had already changed color. On the dark land, he saw vast tracts of farmland. Countless people and serfs were scattered between the ridges of the fields, shuttling back and forth among the dense crops, and there was no end in sight. Barren, desolate, poor. Countless labels of Antolia flashed through the Earl's mind, so that the face of the Earl of Greywater Castle could not help but become a little confused. Who the hell called this place a barren land? Exclamation mark. If this is considered barren, then what is Greywater Castle? Is it a place of exile with no grass growing? Chapter 131 Master Lie so terrifying. A feeling of fear spread in the heart of the Count of Greywater Castle. Because the scene before his eyes was not completely different from the picture he imagined in his mind, but it was basically unrelated. He didn't know why the land of Antolia was black, but what he knew was that the vast farmland in front of him, which was so vast that he could not see the edge, would bring an extremely abundant amount of food and grass to this noble territory on the edge of the kingdom, and bring an extraordinary harvest. But if the food in Antolia was so abundant, why did the Ximena family purchase food and grass everywhere during the cold winter? Eli Wayne couldn't figure it out in his heart, but it didn't stop him from thinking about it himself. It only took a moment for the Count from Greywater Castle to come up with a very reasonable explanation for everything he saw. And according to his conclusion, the rumors of the shortage of food and grass in Antolia over the years were simply false news released by the Ximena family over the years. This is to let the Duke of Galicia relax his vigilance, so that the Ximena family, which has been dormant for many years, can find an opportunity to take advantage of the passage of time. So, look, just relying on a civil war that swept the entire Andal kingdom, the Ximena family relied on the foundation of many years to leap forward and became a powerful noble that cannot be ignored in the southern part of the kingdom. It was at this moment that the logical chain in the mind of the Count of Greywater Castle finally completed the closed loop. The Count suddenly realized that if what he thought was true, then the Ximena family must have the potential to far exceed the Bravis family. Perhaps it won't be long before the southern part of the kingdom will welcome a new duke. After all, even if the Earl has been in the circle of nobles for many years, he has never heard of a family hiding so deeply. Even the young León is so unfathomable. Not only the Count of Greywater Castle, almost all the nobles who came to Antolia today have the same fantasy. The soft and hard roads, the endless fields, and the construction site on the west bank of the White Blade River. They dared not think any further. After all, what was presented to them was only the situation on the east bank of the White Blade River. As for the west bank of the White Blade River, or even the southwest highlands often mentioned by the people of Antolia, they knew nothing about it. The large population can still be explained by the collection of refugees after the war, but the rest, at least in the eyes of the nobles of this era, is impossible to achieve in such a short time. Therefore, when the nobles from the south of the kingdom gathered in the grand banquet hall in the Thorn territory, everyone was particularly respectful to the extremely young Marcus. Especially when León, the host, entered the venue last, the nobles who were still whispering were almost silent in an instant, and did not dare to show any usurpation. Looking at the scene in front of him, León was naturally quite satisfied. Obviously, what the nobles saw and heard in the land of Antolia brought a great shock to their hearts. Since the nobles present all respected the Ximena family and the newly promoted Marcus, his move to show his strength this time was considered to have achieved initial results. Now he is the lord of the southern nobles. If the vassals cannot bow their heads, then what is the point of being a lord? Sit down. Sit down. León's eyes swept over the nobles present. Yes, everyone came, giving him face. But it's a little dark, light up the candles. León's voice had just fallen, and in full view of the crowd, the waiter on the side hurriedly brought a golden candlestick that was shining with golden light. And everyone was familiar with this candlestick. Because the original location of this candlestick should be the Bravis family castle in Parma City, which was used by the Duke of Galicia to calm the situation every time he held a meeting. All of a sudden, the banquet hall, which was already quite quiet, became even quieter, so much so that León could even hear the nobles' slightly heavy breathing. Is it brighter? León asked casually. It's brighter. Brighter. It's much brighter. Indeed, it's almost as bright as Parma. Parma. When an inappropriate word came out of the nobles' voices, the nobles present fell silent again, staring at each other. When León looked in the direction of the sound, a familiar face suddenly came into León's sight. It was an acquaintance, Calendar Wayne, the son of the Earl of Greywater Castle, a silly guy. He could even be said to be León's little fanboy, but his EQ was a bit low. Shut up. Oh. Calendar Wayne knew he had said the wrong thing, and quickly covered his mouth with his hand. After this brief interlude, León was finally able to get to the point. There are only two purposes for this banquet. The first is to show the strength of Antolia, which has obviously been accomplished. As for the second point, it is to sort out the rights and obligations between León and his vassals. You know, although the land of Antolia can be regarded as a fish that slips through the net under the feudal fiefdom system, the southern part of the kingdom is by no means the case. Since Wilbert I has arranged so many vassals for his subordinates, the obligations that he should bear and the obligations that the vassals should bear should be made clear in advance. After all, although the number of vassals under León is not as many as the previous Duke of Galicia, he is still a Marcus after all. If you add up the vassals, there are actually quite a few. Not to mention the old acquaintances who can participate in this banquet, such as the Earl of Greywater Castle and the Viscount of Ram City, who have provided convenience for León to go north. If you count the vassals brought by the vassals, such as those small nobles such as barons who are qualified to participate in this banquet, there are dozens of people in total. Although according to the rules of this era, the vassal of my vassal is not my vassal. But the obligations that León set for his direct vassals will eventually be indirectly transferred to those lowest level nobles. It is for this reason that León simply asked all the nobles to come. On the one hand, he showed his openness, and on the other hand, he wanted to take the opportunity to see if there are any good seedlings worth winning over in the south of the kingdom. Since Antolia's talent resources are extremely scarce, if conditions permit, it is always right to intentionally cultivate a few confidants among the nobles, right? Chapter 132, Noble title is available. Please chat privately if you are interested. In this era, how are the rights and obligations of lords and vassals defined? At least in the current Andal kingdom, in many cases, they can actually be negotiated. The past Antolia is a living example. Every year of the jackdaw, The highland hounds from the abandoned land will bring extremely painful losses to this land. Therefore, Leon's father, the previous generation of Viscount Antolia Arthur Ximena, reached an agreement with the Duke of Galicia in the communication that the Duke of Galicia, as the Lord, does not need to send troops to assist, but he must provide other conveniences for the Ximena family. Now that Leon has become the new lord of many southern nobles, the agreements reached by the nobles with the Bravas family in the past are naturally not counted. However, no matter how much they talk, there must be an initial standard first. The laws of the Andal kingdom have set limits on this. Since the vassals' territory and power all come from the lord, since the nobles in the south of the kingdom have become vassals of the Ximena family, they naturally need to pay taxes and serve Leon. However, the tax mentioned here is not the usual taxation that Leon understood in his previous life. It mainly refers to the inheritance tax of noble vassals. Take the Earl of Greywater Castle as an example. On weekdays, at least when the Duke of Galicia was still alive, the Earl of Greywater Castle did not need to pay much tax to Leon. Even if he had to pay, he only paid a small amount symbolically. Only when the Earl of Greywater Castle, Eli Wayne, died and his son, Corand Wayne, inherited the title of the Earl of Greywater Castle, did he need to pay a considerable inheritance tax to his lord, the current Marquis of Antolia, León Ximena. Of course, since the amount is not low, it can be paid in installments in most cases. When Leon just inherited the title, the reason why Antolia faced a serious shortage of funds was actually related to the inheritance tax paid to the Bravas family at that time. Therefore, the income source of the noble lords in this era mainly comes from their own direct territories, such as land taxes, business taxes, head taxes, marriage taxes, and the income from some self-managed industries. However, special circumstances also exist. For example, if the vassal under Leon is not yet an adult, then Leon, as the lord, can actually obtain most of the income generated by the custody of the underage vassal's territory before the vassal reaches adulthood. And at the end of each year, the vassals will basically pay a small sum of money to show their loyalty and goodwill. It is precisely because of the above that the obligation to pay taxes is actually very watery, and the main focus is on military service. The vassals under the lord have the obligation to serve the lord, and because the population of each noble territory in this era is generally small, therefore, providing conscripts to the lord and following the lord to go on expeditions has become the main obligation of the vassals. But Leon doesn't like this way of distribution. He has a brave and combat-ready Antolian army under his command, so why would he care about the conscripts sent from various noble lords? Could those conscripts from various noble lords replace the Antolians to march to the abandoned land? This is almost impossible. Unless a large number of vassals are needed to strengthen their momentum during wartime, otherwise, the obligation to serve is not very necessary. Therefore, Leon plans to have a good chat with his vassals about this topic at this banquet. For example, in peacetime, your obligation to serve in the military can actually be offset by the substitute service money. Compared to letting the vassals run to Antolia to serve, Leon actually hopes that his vassals can be more direct. Why do they have nothing to do to serve? Isn't it better to give them money directly? Exclamation mark. The reason why other noble lords are particularly concerned about the obligation to serve in the military is mainly because their own armies cannot fight, and they use the conscripts regularly paid by the vassals to fill the number. But Antolia obviously doesn't need this. However, Leon's proposal obviously caused quite a stir in everyone's heart. After all, even if there have been precedents for the substitutionary service money before, it is not very common. However, Leon felt that the nobles under his command should still give him some face. Any lord must have the means to curb his vassals. Before this, the Duke of Galicia could rely on the supply of food to gain an advantage in the negotiations with Antolia, and now, Leon can also rely on Antolia's strong military force to gain greater benefits for himself. Even if you can't really fight, it is an invisible psychological pressure. Therefore, Leon is not in a hurry about this, but instead throws out a long-prepared topic: the ownership of the title of Count Colt. In fact, from the bottom of his heart, Leon doesn't really want to give away the land he has obtained. This is probably a common problem for travelers from the previous life. However, since you have come to another world, you must abide by the unspoken rules of another world. Change is of course possible, but it must be subtle, but you must seek progress in a steady manner. For example, the surrogate fee mentioned by Leon earlier was actually an attempt by Leon to expand the source of tax revenue. Leon's ultimate goal was to realize the possibility of comprehensive taxation on vassals, but he was really worried that he would get into trouble if he took too big a step, so he tried it out in the form of surrogate fees. The same was true for the two noble titles of Count Cold and Viscount Chenmulin and the noble fiefdoms under their names. Leon wanted to keep them all, but the current situation of this era allowed him to keep only one at most. According to Leon's plan, the title of Count Cold must be divided. There were already several noble territories between Cold City and Anatolia. If he stayed, Cold City would become an enclave of the Ximena family. On the other hand, no one would object to Leon keeping the title of Viscount Chenmulin. After all, everyone was a noble in the south of the kingdom, and they all knew what kind of human tragedy had happened in the fiefdom on the edge of Anatolia during the cold winter last year. Who dared to touch that eerie and strange noble territory? No one. However, in order to make it more reasonable for him to include Chenmulin in the direct territory of the Ximena family, Leon deliberately mentioned, regarding the title of Viscount Chenmulin, "Do you have any ideas?" Chapter 133. No way? Can we do this? What do you think about the title of Viscount Chenmulin? Faced with the topic raised by Leon, the people present did not dare to have any ideas. This is not because of the pressure from the young Marcus, or because of fear of the Ximena family. The main reason is that everyone is a noble in the south of the kingdom, so they know everything about the situation in Chenmulin. Viscount Chenmulin died a long time ago. The only thing that is not well understood is whether the Viscount died under the canine teeth of the Plateau Hounds or died at the hands of the monsters in Chenmulin. The title of Viscount is undoubtedly highly anticipated. But the problem is, even if you really get the title, who dares to go to Chenmulin to accept your own fiefdom? The nobles of the kingdom have the responsibility to defend their land. If you accept this title, you must go to Chenmulin to take office. But the tree people in Chenmulin don't care whether you are a noble or not. You may not survive a day there. Therefore, for the title of Viscount Chenmulin, everyone present naturally stays away. Everyone was a noble who already had a family and a business, and they were all guys who cherished their lives. When the risks and benefits were completely disproportionate, they really didn't dare to take risks with their lives. Chenmu Forest is adjacent to the Marquis's fiefdom. In my opinion, the Marquis should manage it on his behalf. We will never have any objections. After a long silence, the Viscount of Gongayang City broke the silence of everyone. Then, the nobles who were originally looking at each other in bewilderment quickly expressed their extremely approving attitude. Yes, yes. The Marquis must not refuse. Everything is up to the Marquis. Seeing that the nobles present were intimidated by the title of Viscount Chenmu Forest, Leon was too lazy to spend time arguing, and simply said very openly, "In this case, Chenmu Forest will be managed by Anatolia for the time being." Leon didn't care whether he cultivated people or not. Anyway, the expansion of the territory actually controlled by the Ximena family is a good thing after all. Even if Anatolia can't deal with the tree guards entrenched in the sunken wood forest, it doesn't mean that they can't deal with them forever. After today's whole process, if someone wants to wait until the sunken wood forest is completely controlled by Anatolia before picking peaches, then they need to think carefully about what consequences they should bear. Although the sunken wood forest is left by me, Cold City must be sealed off. You have enough time to consider. In a month, the title of Count Cold will be won by the highest bidder. In fact, according to common sense, Leon, as the Marquis of Anatolia, should arrange his confidant to the position of Count Colt. But before that, he didn't even have a vassal under his command, and there was really no suitable candidate for nomination. The Viscount of the Ram City who killed Count Colt with him might barely be considered a confidant, but he already had a fiefdom and didn't plan to get himself an enclave in the westernmost part of the southern part of the kingdom. It was precisely because of the above reasons that Leon simply offered the highest bid. No matter whether you are a noble, a merchant or someone else in the east, west, south or north of the kingdom, as long as the price you offer is high enough, the enlightened Marquis of Anatolia will give priority to you. Within 1 month, everyone can apply to Anatolia and submit a letter of motivation, a document to apply for the title of Earl, and also state the price you are willing to pay for the title of Earl of Colt in the letter. The Anatolian authorities will consider everyone's situation and finally determine the candidate for Earl of Colt. Since Wilbert I allowed Leon to make his own decision, he would naturally follow through with it. However, Leon's words stunned everyone present. Viscount of Ram City, W. Earl of Greywater Castle, degree Cyrillic letter de degree, Other nobles, Greek letter sigma, degree Cyrillic letter de degree, no way? Can we do this? Although it sounds a bit outrageous and completely different from the previous way of enthroning vassals, the owner of the title of Count Colt will inevitably be Leon's vassal anyway, so there's really nothing to say. Moreover, since those who want to obtain the title of Count have no idea how many competitors they will have, and do not know what conditions others will offer for the title of Hereditary Count, so this is bound to make Anatolia gain the greatest benefit. In short, after this banquet, you can communicate directly with Aaron about whether to insist on serving the Ximena family or paying the substitute fee, and whether you are interested in the title of Count Colt. This is also for everyone's consideration. After all, Anatolia is located at the border of the kingdom and may be attacked by Highland hounds at any time. If you come to serve, there will inevitably be some inevitable losses. Leon pointed to the old butler standing behind him and continued, I hope that everyone here can thoroughly implement the governance ideas of the Ximena family and contribute their own strength to maintaining the stability of the situation in the south of the kingdom. After that, Leon clapped his hands lightly. The waiters who had been waiting for a long time came out from all directions and served the vassals of the Ximena family with exquisite and profound dishes. Dried meat contributed by Highland hounds, roasted bird legs provided by tall-legged strange birds, and dogfish from the southwest highlands. Although many of the dishes may not be very delicious, they vividly show the threats and challenges faced by Anatolia, which is located on the frontier. For example, the roasted bird legs. It is several meters long and extends directly from one end of the table to the other. It is enough to open the eyes of the nobles who have never set foot on this land, making them fully aware that Anatolia's enemies are actually far more than the well-known Highland hounds. So many vassals who originally wanted to fulfill their obligations by sending conscripts had to seriously consider the feasibility of paying the surrogate fee on time. Even if it doesn't cost money to recruit serfs to serve their lords, if as many people come as many people die, it may be a bit of a loss. If they wanted to reduce casualties during military service, the most direct way was to buy the Ramitrascow Red Devil potion that Leon had been selling for a long time from Anatolia. It would be better to just pay the military service fee. For a while, many nobles suddenly found that their thoughts seemed to be stuck in a cycle. It seemed that paying a military service fee that had never been paid before on schedule had become their most cost-effective choice. After all, Anatolia was not like Parma. If you came here to serve in the military, you might really die. Chapter 134 Tremengard, Feel the Iron Fist from Anatolia. As the banquet ended, most of the nobles gradually dispersed in twos and threes over the next few days. They saw the vast farmland of Anatolia during these days, experienced the slightly sturdy customs and habits of this land, and also saw many creatures they had never seen before at the previous banquet. Improved relations plus 50. A pleasant banquet plus 20. The results of this banquet were quite good, and it was a successful team building. However, what surprised Leon a little was that although both the dried meat of the plateau hound and the long legs of the tall-legged strange bird tasted terrible, many nobles still showed great interest in it and asked Aaron, the old butler of the Ximena family, for price consultation. This also made Leon suddenly realize a fact that he had always ignored before. For the nobles, whether it tastes good or not is secondary. The main thing is that it is rare and can be used to show off. Show off. Scarcity makes things valuable, especially the long legs of the tall-legged strange bird. As the most unpalatable food at the banquet, the bird legs, which were too long and eye-catching, were the most inquired about by the nobles. After being simply roasted, they were long enough to stretch from one end of the long table to the other, which perfectly met the curiosity of the nobles. It also opened up Leon's horizon again, and he discovered another new source of income that belonged to Anatolia. In just one night, the nobles who attended the banquet ordered nearly 100 bird legs, and each bird leg was sold for as much as 20 escudos, which made everyone, including Aaron, marvel. The nobles are really fucking rich. As the nobles left one after another, Anatolia finally returned to its former peace. What made Leon particularly happy was that after considering Leon's proposal, no one chose to fulfill their obligations as vassals by sending conscripts. The payment of the surrogate fee has also become the first and most important system creation since the Ximena family became a great noble. It must be said that the successful implementation of the service fee also made Leon finally relieved. After all, the next expansion direction of Anatolia is the abandoned land located in the south of the mountains, which is a matter that needs to be strictly kept secret under the current situation. If there are really nobles who are stubborn and must send conscripts to serve León, then León can only let those conscripts who come to Anatolia to serve stay on the land of Anatolia forever. For the future of Anatolia, this can be regarded as a stable new source of income. On the croft paper in front of León, Aaron clearly drafted the amount of service fee that each vassal needs to pay, which made León feel happy and relaxed. It was not until this moment that he realized how happy it was to have vassals under his command. The respect of status is secondary, the main thing is to be able to collect money. Even if the wealth accumulated by the Bravas family for generations made the Ximena family feel rich overnight, Anatolia also has many places where money needs to be spent, and it is absolutely not okay to live off the mountain. Even though he knew that money needed to circulate in order to get more benefits, León's hamster attribute made him particularly sensitive to the spending of money. If there is money in, there must be money out, and if there is money out, there must be money in. As a lord, León needs to take the initiative between the inflow and outflow and maintain a balance so that Anatolia can gradually become what León wants under his rule. At the same time, only with a large amount of money coming in can Anatolia afford more troops and create a stronger military strength in the process of infrastructure construction, so that the vassals under his command will be more loyal and honest to offer the money for the service. This will undoubtedly be a virtuous cycle with great positive significance. After all, although the civil war in the kingdom has ended, most of the nobles in the kingdom have also ushered in the peace they have longed for, but this does not mean that Anatolia is the same. As the frontier of the kingdom, León has his own insistence on the number of troops. Because Anatolia today is facing far more severe threats and challenges than ever before. And there is more than one. The first is the black fog from the abandoned land. Why did the Laprics fall into the dilemma of food shortage in the cold winter last year? Why did they choose to pledge allegiance to the Ximena family? If you trace the root cause, the cause is the black fog that gradually poured into this land from the south of the mountains. The spread of the black fog has seriously affected the traditional hunting grounds of the Laprics. The wild animals in the mountains and forests also fled around after sensing the existence of the black fog, making it difficult to continue the tradition of obtaining food through hunting. As a priest of Laprics, Fast finally made the decision to pledge allegiance to the Ximena family in desperation. Now, as time goes by, the black fog pouring into Anatolia from the south of the mountains has not only gradually increased, but also gradually expanded its scope of influence, and even has shown a trend of spreading to the plains at the foot of the mountain. León didn't know why such a change happened, but he knew that if he couldn't solve it as soon as possible, it would not be long before even the newly reclaimed farmland at the foot of the mountain would be affected by the black fog, and it might even lead to a reduction in grain production. As for Anatolia, whose population has skyrocketed, the reduction in grain production will undoubtedly have a strong impact on Anatolia's food security, and may even shake the Ximena family's rule over this land. This is something León absolutely cannot tolerate. As for the second challenge, it is naturally the tree man entrenched in the sunken wood forest. Before this, although the Viscount of the sunken wood forest was occupied by the awakened tree guards, it did not have a direct impact on Anatolia after all. In addition, the tree guards did not seem to migrate outside the sunken wood forest, so León temporarily ignored the threat from the tree guards. But now, after the noble banquet that just ended, it has become an indisputable fact that the sunken wood forest will be handed over to Anatolia for custody, so the tree guards entrenched in the sunken wood forest naturally become a threat in León's eyes. León doesn't really care what the tree guards are guarding. But what he knows is that the living wood that falls from the tree guards is an important magical material for making shadow manipulators. This is what Anatolia must use to solve the black fog problem. So, it's time to let those tree people entrenched in the sunken woods feel the iron fist from Anatolia. After a brief thought, León raised his head and asked seriously, "The bard we caught earlier should still be alive, right?" Chapter 135, Spreading Rumors? I'm a professional. In fact, as a troubadour, Journey has gotten used to his life in Anatolia. Although Journey and the Anatolians did not get along very well at the beginning, as time went by, this young troubadour from the north of the kingdom developed a deep attachment to the land far away from home. Or to put it more bluntly, as the Anatolians gradually relaxed their supervision of the troubadour, Journey has successfully turned himself into a spiritual Anatolian, or Jingan for short. Even in many cases, he is more like an Anatolian than those native Anatolians. There is no way, everything on this land makes Journey curious. As a troubadour, he has countless heroic epics and kingdom legends in his mind, such as the struggle history of the Dragon Slayer and 101 Days and Nights that the adventurer and the Elf Queen have to tell. But he knows very well that these so-called heroic epics and kingdom legends are just fabricated interpretations. But everything in Anatolia is real. When the hounds of the plateau invaded, the poor people of Anatolia used their flesh and blood to build a solid wall. On the highlands far to the southwest, young soldiers used their weapons to hunt the tall birds that occupied the highlands. The ferocious beasts in the mountains and forests were the food for the Anatolians, and the dangerous environment shaped the Anatolians' will to work hard. During this period, Bjorni not only lived in the Thorn territory, but also traveled to the southwest highlands. What he saw, heard, thought and felt, everything he saw and heard in Anatolia frequently touched the heart of this young poet, which shocked him and aroused his deep fascination. What's the fun of telling stories? Only personal experience is the most exciting. Chewing dried meat and gnawing bird legs. He boasted and farted with the mercenaries in the tavern, and even went to the mountains and forests to hunt with a bow and arrow in person. As a result, as early as when Leon went to the northern expedition, this genuine spiritual Anatolian had already successfully passed the many tests set by Aaron, successfully became a retainer of the Ximena family, and participated in the work of compiling the history of the Ximena family. And he also relied on his own talents to combine the history of the Ximena family with a heroic epic in his mind, so that the history of the Ximena family has a more reasonable logical chain. So, it is precisely because of the above that when Leon realized that the tree guards in the sunken woods needed to be solved urgently, he immediately remembered the young man who brought the news of the tree guards to him. Bjorni, long time no see. In the study of the Lord's castle, Bjorni finally met the young lord he was loyal to for the second time. Although he was invited out by the guards at that time, after these days of thinking and Aaron's reminder, Bjorni finally realized Leon's painstaking efforts. At that time, Leon did not disbelieve in the existence of the tree guards, but for the Anatolians at that time, blocking the news was obviously a more correct choice. And now that his lord has become a Marquis, didn't he summon him immediately? I was a little too reckless before, I hope the Marquis will punish me. Looking at the young lord in front of him, Bjorni lowered his head very obediently. The more he compiled the history of the Ximena family, the more he could clearly realize the Ximena family's contribution to this land. The year of the jackdaw is a reincarnation every 5 years. Since the ancestors of the Ximena family became the rulers of this land, the people living on this land have been led by the Ximena family and guarded their homes with blood. Perhaps for others, the thin history will not produce such a heavy feeling. But Bjorni, a wandering poet, has a deep memory of this. Get up. Leon waved his hand and said softly, at that time, Anatolia had just collected a large number of refugees who were frightened by the plateau hounds. If the news of the tree guards spread, even if those monsters had no ambitions for Anatolia, they would still make the refugees panic. That's why I told you to keep silent. And now, the civil war in the Andal kingdom has ended, and the Anatolian army has all returned to the camp. It's time to deal with the problem of the sunken wood forest. Leon picked up the wine glass in front of him, took a sip, and said thoughtfully, just follow the orders of the Marquis. Bjorni immediately patted his chest and expressed his attitude. You know, that's the tree guard. It's a monster that only existed in the legends of the continent. If he could participate in it, then he, Bjorni, might be a participant in a brand new legend. It does require you to operate it. Hearing this, Leon's expression finally became serious. No one, including you, knows what the tree guards in the sunken woods are like. What are their weaknesses, what are their nemesis, and what other ways of attack do they have besides whipping with branches? We know nothing about this information. As the Lord of Anatolia, I will never send my soldiers to fight when the situation is unclear, and I will not use the lives of my soldiers to examine the possibility of actually controlling the sunken woods. So, I need someone to scout the way for the Anatolia soldiers. Does the Marquis want me to go? Bjorni's eyes couldn't help but condense slightly, and his legs and feet trembled involuntarily. He has indeed become a retainer of the Ximena family, but his previous experience in the sunken woods has made him unforgettable. Not to mention going back to the sunken woods, just hearing the name of the tree guards is enough to make Bjorni's heart tremble. Of course not. Leon shook his head. You are a wandering poet from the north of the kingdom. Compared with others, you can tell more vivid stories. Stories. Bjorni couldn't help but reveal a puzzled look in his eyes. He felt that his lord's thinking span seemed a bit large, so that he was a little confused for a while. The tree people in the sunken woods guard the treasure buried underground, or someone discovered a gold mine in the sunken woods, or there is something in the sunken woods. Whatever you want to make up. As long as you can fool those mercenaries from all over the kingdom who love money like their lives, and let them explore the way for the soldiers of Anatolia driven by greed, then you, Journey, will have done a great job. If you can still read it, remember to subscribe. Although the average subscription has been increasing, the follow-up subscription has been decreasing. I won't ask for monthly tickets or rewards. After all, my update speed is really slow. The pace has been a bit lagging recently. Let me think about how to speed up the pace. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelis. There you'll find the original version of this story, and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 136: Antolia's First Gold Rush. From being confused to being puzzled, and then from being puzzled to being enlightened. Leon's words instantly opened up Johnny's mind, and also made his understanding of himself suddenly rise to another level. The meaning of his lord's words was actually very clear. Since the situation in the sunken wood forest is still unclear, then fabricate some rumors, which can be gold mines or treasures. In short, although you can play freely, you must try your best to make people believe that although going to the sunken wood forest is a life-threatening business, it is really possible to obtain excess returns. Perhaps the nobles will just laugh it off. But because the mercenary market in this era has been in a state of oversupply for a long time, there may really be mercenaries who are greedy for money and believe it to be true and go to the sunken wood forest to try their luck. As for how many people will go to Anatolia, it depends on their own ability. At this moment, Johnny suddenly felt how heavy the burden on his shoulders was, and realized how deep Leon's expectations of him were. However, Johnny has sufficient confidence in his ability. As a wandering poet whose parents died, he was able to travel all the way from the north of the kingdom to the south. This was enough to prove Johnny's storytelling skills and his language skills. Moderate pressure can best stimulate a person's potential. Moreover, Johnny was not a person who was content with the status quo, otherwise, he would not have transformed into a spiritual Antorian in just half a year. Don't worry, Marcus. I will definitely live up to your trust. Johnny vowed, but, if it was just me. Although he had sufficient confidence in his rumor-mongering skills, no, in his language skills, Johnny knew clearly that if he relied on himself alone, it would be difficult for him to complete the Marquis's entrustment. You must know a lot of bards. For them, telling about the treasures in the sunken wood forest is definitely more interesting than singing those old-fashioned heroic epics. I will ask Aaron to provide you with manpower and financial support, but at the same time, you must give the Ximena family a satisfactory answer. I don't want the process, I only look at the results. Hearing this, Johnny's confidence doubled. Hiring bards to promote the glorious history of their families is actually a routine operation of the nobles of the Andal Kingdom. As long as the money is enough, Johnny guarantees that the news of the sunken wood forest will reach the ears of every mercenary. I will set off in 3 days. After getting Leon's guarantee, Johnny said without hesitation. He thinks he is the most outstanding bard of the younger generation of the Andal Kingdom. Now that he has finally got a chance to prove himself in front of the Lord, he will naturally not let it go. Just like Leon needs a war to establish the status of the Ximena family in the south of the kingdom, for Johnny, this is also a war that belongs to him. A month later. Brundick, Mill Street. As an important town in the north of the kingdom, as the rebellion that swept across the Andal Kingdom came to an abrupt end overnight, the mercenaries wandering around this land were forced to lose their employers and became an unstable factor wandering between taverns. Although Wilbert I has made it clear that the rebellion of the Duke of Sadwind Castle will not implicate the rest of the northern nobles, the nobles living in this land have also spontaneously reduced the number of troops to show their feelings. It's oh damn cold. A group of burly men roughly pushed open the creaking wooden door of the tavern and slapped the money bags on their waists in front of the boss. Strong liquor. Obviously, this is another group of idle mercenaries. If the nobles, who are vested interests, are the group of people who yearn for peace the most on weekdays, then the mercenaries who need to rely on war and conflict to fill their pockets are undoubtedly the group that desires war the most. The owner of the tavern was obviously used to the mercenaries' style. He took the money bag skillfully and then quickly carried a large barrel of beer for the group of burly mercenaries. Although it was still autumn, The biting cold wind had already begun to sweep across the land in the north of the kingdom. The hardened land and dry climate were already quite unpleasant, and the loss of income made the mercenaries who were entrenched here particularly restless. Only the hot maids and stimulating strong liquor could soothe their inner restlessness for a moment. A group of rich hooligans. The owner of the tavern muttered silently, and then retracted his body to the seat behind the bar. He knew the morals of the mercenaries very well, especially when dozens of violent mercenaries gathered in the small tavern. So, he also habitually deducted the cost of repairing the tables and chairs from the coins given. But this time, although the mercenaries in the tavern seemed a little difficult to deal with, they did not pick up wooden chairs and start fighting on the spot as the tavern owner expected. On the contrary, many mercenaries gathered in the corner of the tavern and whispered after a few glasses of strong liquor. "Is there really gold? God knows whether it is true or false. Anyway, it has been rumored recently that a gold mine has been discovered in the south of the kingdom. Shit. If there is really gold, how can it be our turn? Those greedy nobles must have held the gold mine in their hands long ago. I heard that there are many monsters where the gold mine was discovered, and the local nobles have died long ago. Is it not the sunken wood forest? It must be said that Johnny is very efficient. With the financial support of Leon, Johnny even fabricated dozens of versions of rumors, and they are different and bizarre. However, when these rumors with noses and eyes are combined together, they can be verified layer by layer. And this is the power of Johnny. As the self-proclaimed first bard in the kingdom, Johnny knew very well that if he told the mercenaries directly that there was gold in the south of the kingdom, they would only doubt it. But if he was vague and could let the mercenaries verify it themselves, the mercenaries, who were already short-sighted, would definitely believe the information they had collected and sorted out by themselves. And even if there were mercenaries who thought it was too outrageous, they would never take the initiative to expose it. After all, human nature is extremely complicated. More mercenaries went to the south, and fewer mercenaries stayed in the north to compete with them. Therefore, even if there were smart people among the mercenaries, they were willing to go with the flow and let the mercenary groups wandering in the kingdom set off a wave of gold rush to the south. Chapter 137 Ancient Magic Runes and Shadow Manipulator. The soft morning sunlight shone on Leon's study, and the solid wood furniture in the room seemed to exude a refreshing fragrance. Leon rubbed his slightly drowsy head and looked at the great wizard Albert, who was sitting in front of him eating. The breakfast in the study was not rich, but it was nutritionally balanced. The berries picked in the forest seemed to be bulging, and a light bite would pour out countless sweet and delicious juices, making the great wizard who had not slept all night unable to stop. Immune to magic attacks. Although Leon, who usually sleeps until noon on weekdays, was pulled out of bed by his teacher early in the morning, he quickly sorted out the slightly messy thoughts in his mind. Not bad. Just last night, the great wizard agreed to Leon's request and went to the sunken wood forest to meet the tree guards entrenched in the forest. However, the final result was not optimistic. Although Albert had made remarkable achievements in magic, he was still helpless in the face of those tree guards who were completely immune to any magic attacks. In that case, let's leave it to those mercenaries who came from afar to deal with it first. Leon couldn't help but sigh. The reason why he was so persistent in dealing with the tree guards entrenched in the sunken woods was not entirely to increase Antonia's stability by +1, but mainly because destroying the tree guards would drop a magical material called living wood, and this magical material was extremely important for the construction of the shadow manipulator. The black fog from the south of the mountains was Antonia's #1 enemy. This thing was not like a plateau hound or a tall bird that could stand there and fight against Antonia's soldiers. It was just a ball of fog. How could it be fought? So the only thing Leon could do was to quickly make a shadow manipulator according to the documents in the ancient archives. Shadow manipulator, shadow monster trap. This was the way to solve the black fog and shadow monsters that Leon had finally obtained from his own golden finger before the shadow monsters in the ancient archives rioted. However, the only small flaw was that this thing was not like scientific instruments and land compactors, which were ready-made and placed there for him to use. Leon needed to use the power of the entire Antolia to make it himself. It is better to rely on yourself than to rely on others. Although Leon had long expected that one day he would no longer be able to get ready-made machinery from the ancient archives, he did not expect that this day would come so early and so quickly. Teacher, what do you think of those ancient magic words? However, Leon quickly adjusted his slightly regretful mentality and looked at Albert with a little hope. Leon still respected the ability of this great wizard. But after hearing Leon's words, Albert's face finally showed a hint of embarrassment. It's quite complicated. When Leon invited him to Anatolia, ancient magic was one of the conditions Leon set. But at that time, as a great wizard, Albert had full confidence in his own strength, so he was somewhat dismissive of the so-called ancient magic. In his opinion, where's the ancient magic? At most, it was just like the magic potion of Anatolia, which was just something that the Anatolians who had never seen the world made by themselves, and it was difficult to enter the elegant hall. However, when he finally saw the magic books piled up on the bookshelves in Leon's lord's castle, and saw those strange and mysterious ancient spells, Albert's worldview can be said to have completely collapsed. As a great wizard, he felt for the first time that his understanding of magic was shallow. Even though most of the ancient magic did not fit Albert's magic path, it also opened a door to a new world for him. After all, the magic he was familiar with and mastered was ultimately derived from the ancient magic. If you want the shadow manipulator to work, the application of ancient magic is particularly important. I hope the teacher can make a breakthrough. Leon said very sincerely and urgently. Magic. These symbols, which were originally only engraved on the stone slabs, are the source of magic. As Leon's understanding of ancient magic gradually moved from those lengthy spells to ancient magic runes, Leon finally realized that these symbols, whose origins were unknown even to the ancestors, were the source of magic. Scientific instruments, land compactors. The strange patterns on these relics of the ancestors, whose structures and principles are difficult to explain with common sense, are actually the derivatives and applications of ancient magic runes. Not only that, even the stone tablets preserved by the Laprit tribe are engraved with magic runes whose specific functions are not clear. Even the shadow manipulators that Anatolia urgently needs now are also driven by magic runes. So long before Albert decided to become the Great Wizard of Anatolia, in addition to Collins and Kerman, the two wizards who went to study potion science, Fast and Leon himself had been studying the application of these ancient magic runes. Even when Leon went north to fight, he also brought with him a magic rune booklet that he had found in the ancient archives, not daring to delay his research progress. In his opinion, ancient magic runes were the foundation of magic engineering, and the only way for the Ximena family to cross the mountains in the south and affect the abandoned land. However, even if they both belonged to the category of magic, but for the wizards of this era, ancient magic runes were like a brand new field. Even if the books in the ancient archives could point out the right direction for Anatolia, the difficulty could be imagined. But Leon couldn't care less. No matter how difficult it was, he had to do it. Because if the black fog that spread from the south was ignored, I'm afraid that before the autumn harvest next year, the black fog would bring a heavy blow to Anatolia, which had just improved its land. The generous Bravis family had already provided Anatolia with other magic materials needed to build the shadow manipulator. So at the moment, there are only two problems left to solve before the manufacture of the shadow manipulator. The living wood that the tree guard exploded is undoubtedly one of them. As for the second one, it is naturally the ancient magic runes that are suitable for the shadow manipulator. Leon does not need the wizards of Anatolia to have a deep understanding of various magic runes. The only thing he needs is for them to look through the books of ancient magic. In the vast collection of books, find the magic rune called Purification by the Ancestors. Chapter 138, Holy Crap! They even made a steam engine. The manufacture of the shadow manipulator was stuck at the last step, and there was no progress in the process of actually controlling the sunken wood forest. This undoubtedly caused Leon, who had just been canonized as a Marcus, a headache and made him feel stressed. Even the cool morning breeze of autumn could not wipe away the worries in Leon's heart. Fortunately, his mentality has always been very good. After sending Albert out of the study, he personally devoted himself to the study of ancient magic. The lengthy ancient magic not only did not make his mind more chaotic, but instead soothed Leon's mood. He has sufficient confidence in the mages of Anatolia. Because just as Leon had expected before, Albert's arrival made the mages who originally lived in Parma City look at this noble territory far away from the border of the kingdom for the first time. As a result, the mages of Anatolia ushered in a surge during the days when Leon returned. Even though Leon conducted a very strict political review of every mage who was originally believed to be loyal to the Ximena family, it also allowed Albert's mage research team to expand to a size of more than a dozen people. Besides, this is not to start the magic rune research from scratch. Leon's only requirement for the Antolian mage is to quickly find the magic rune called Purification that is used in the Shadow Manipulator from the countless ancient magic documents, and then copy and paste it. However, just when the Antolian mages were worried about the strange ancient magic runes, a piece of news came, which made Leon's eyes widen. Steam engine. You said Hillman made a steam engine. When the words from the waiter's mouth reached Leon's ears, the young lord couldn't help but be completely shocked. Then, he rushed to the waiter in 3 or 2 steps, stared at him and said, "Say it again." Oh. The waiter was a little dumbfounded. He really didn't understand why that steam engine would make his usually calm lord lose his composure, but he still organized his words carefully and said again, "Lord Hillman said that the steam engine you asked him to build has been built and he wants you to come and have a look." Steam engine. After hearing such a precise answer from the waiter again, Leon had basically believed this statement. After all, there was no concept of steam engines in this era. It can be said that in the entire Anatolia and even the entire Andal Kingdom, the only 2 people who knew this term, besides himself as a traverser, were the dwarf craftsman Hillman, who is repeatedly told by him, "Prepare the horses. Go now," Leon said without hesitation. After experiencing the twists and turns brought to him by the Shadow Manipulator, this was undoubtedly the best news Leon had heard since returning to Anatolia. In the hearts of any traverser, the steam engine has a greater significance than other inventions. This is not only a milestone invention, but also the beginning of the industrial age. So, how could Leon delay for even a moment? He didn't even have time to eat a few bites of breakfast, and he rushed all the way to the iron workshop located in the upper reaches of the White Blade River with his guards. Of course, although it is called the iron workshop, there is obviously more than just the iron workshop here. For the sake of confidentiality, safety and transportation of raw materials, Leon deliberately moved a series of workshops that could barely be classified as industrial, such as the blacksmith shop and sword workshop in Anatolia, to the area adjacent to the Southwest Highlands, forming a small village specializing in the production of ironware. But at this moment, Leon had a little regret. After all, it takes half a day to get from the Thorn territory to the iron workshop in Anatolia. When the scorching sun at noon was lingering over Anatolia, Leon, who was already sweating profusely, finally saw the dwarf craftsman Hillman, who had been waiting on the roadside early. "Mr. Marcus, take me to see." Leon couldn't wait to say before Hillman's voice fell. You know, since he took over this fiefdom on the edge of the kingdom, Leon has been waiting for this day to come. Seeing this, Hillman, who was also quite excited, also realized Leon's excitement, and immediately led his lord to the depths of the village. After passing through the patrol lines and wooden walls built by the soldiers of Anatolia, a very simple looking. Wait, what the hell is this? Even though Leon never asked the steam engine in this world to look similar to the appearance of the previous life, the machine in front of Leon was enough to make the young lord's eyes go black. Rather than saying it was a steam engine, Leon would rather believe that it was a strange-looking pot. Steam machine. Seeing his lord's face suddenly turn pale, Hillman, who was originally full of confidence, couldn't help but become a little less confident. Could it be that there was some deviation in his understanding of the steam engine? Impossible. Absolutely impossible. I am the most outstanding dwarf craftsman. In short, what appeared in Leon's vision was a boiling pot. On top of the pot, there was a hollow sphere with 2 pipes inserted, and it was constantly rotating under the action of steam. See the Easter egg chapter for pictures. Well, this thing seems to be a simplified version of a steam engine. After some observation, Leon, as a science student, can still understand the general principle of this thing. The main structure and principle are actually very simple, and even very similar to the predecessor of the steam engine, the steam ball. A hollow sphere with a Cyrillic letter gas-shaped short tube on each side, a closed boiler filled with water, and 2 hollow pipes connected to the sphere. The bottom of the pot is heated to make the water boil. The steam enters the ball through the pipe, and then is discharged from the Cyrillic letter gas-shaped short tubes on both sides of the sphere, causing the sphere to rotate. Although it is very simple, it must be said that this thing has really achieved a historic leap in converting thermal energy into kinetic energy. Mr. Marcus, this is just the initial appearance. Hillman on the side hurriedly explained, and then pointed to a large iron box that Leon originally thought was a background board. This is the semi-automatic quiver that the craftsman improved based on the principle of the steam engine. There is no need for an archer. It can shoot by itself. Chapter 139 Semi-Automatic Arrow Launcher 10. In fact, Theoretically speaking, the power of this steam engine similar to a gas ball in front of us cannot even reach the efficiency of the Newcomen steam engine. If compared with the Watt steam engine, its power is only a pitiful 1/4 But for today's Antolia, it is good enough. Leon knows very well that the development of anything cannot be achieved overnight, and it is a gradual process. What's more, this device that looks like a gas ball is just the first generation of Antolia's product. He has never thought of using this thing to pull a steam locomotive, and has never considered using such a thing to engage in industrial production. So, when the dwarf craftsman named Hillman suddenly proposed that he was inspired by it and worked with the craftsmen of Antolia to create a new weapon they called a semi-automatic arrow launcher, Leon was actually very surprised. Unexpectedly, after the first generation of steam engines, he actually got a surprise that he had never expected. "Is this thing semi-automatic?" Leon asked uncertainly as he walked around the large iron box placed at the edge of the field. Note, don't criticize it yet, this weapon is a bit lame, Master Lai will help you criticize it later. Yes. Hillman nodded in response. Driven by steam, the hollow sphere installed in the center of the device can rotate quickly, which shows that the steam can provide power as you said. So we added threads to the crossbar that fixed the hollow sphere, so that the sphere can rotate from one end of the crossbar to the other during the continuous rotation. And this gave us, no, it made him, a bold idea. At this point, Hillman pushed out a very young craftsman from the crowd. Scoop thought that since the power of steam can drive the sphere to rotate, can it also replace human power to pull the bowstring? Therefore, this is the birth of this semi-automatic arrow launcher in front of us. As a proud dwarf, Hillman's character prevented him from doing stupid things to monopolize the credit, so he very openly gave the screen to the young craftsman. Marcus. The young man named Scoop was obviously a little nervous when he met his lord for the first time, so he stuttered when he spoke. Relax, just introduce yourself in the way you're familiar with, Leon said with a pleasant face. Leon has always valued the technical talents of Antolia, especially young people like Scopu, who are not even 20 years old now, and can at least fight for Antolia for another 40 years. Then retire and return to work, continue to fight, and create a better tomorrow for the Ximena family. Is that so? Scopu muttered silently, and then carefully pulled down the lever behind the semi-automatic quiver. In a flash, arrows burst out of the quiver, and then continued to slow down during the friction with the air, falling on the ground not far from the target. The design of this weapon is not perfect at the moment, and the power that steam can provide is slightly insufficient, so, the effective killing range of these semi-automatic quivers is actually less than 20 meters. If it exceeds 20 meters, it will be like this now. Scopu introduced carefully. In short, the semi-automatic quiver in front of him is still a semi-finished product. Because the power that the first-generation steam engine can provide is not satisfactory, the bowstring installed inside the quiver cannot be fully pulled for the time being. But Leon felt a sense of taking off pants to fart. Although he has always advocated trying to apply steam engines to other fields, this thing seems to be able to do without steam engines. Moreover, it seems to be somewhat similar to the crossbow in the previous life in terms of function. The power and range of a single arrow have become smaller, but the number of arrows that can be fired has increased. How to say it? Leon feels that this thing is actually a bit useless. However, no matter how useless it is, this is the first invention of Antolian craftsmen based on steam engines. And Leon finally discovered a blind spot that he had previously ignored. In this era, it seems that there is no crossbow? Exclamation mark. This is indeed a good idea, but it is not suitable for use on the battlefield. Although he admired the innovative spirit of the Antolian craftsmen, Leon still said truthfully, first, the range is too short, second, the power is too small, and third, it is difficult to transport. And, even without a steam engine, it is actually possible to achieve the possibility of dozens of arrows in a row. Unless we can make a steam cannon that shoots pebbles, or build a smaller and more efficient built-in steam engine, otherwise this thing is not very meaningful. No steam engine. In the days of developing steam engines all day, the Antolian craftsmen actually had a sense of being a little bit stubborn. After a little guidance from Leon, they immediately realized how ridiculous the so-called semi-automatic arrow launcher in front of them was. Marcus. Hillman couldn't help blushing, and even his voice became a little awkward. But the most embarrassed was actually Scoop. The masterpiece he confidently showed to the Marcus was actually a big toy that was completely impractical. But the steam cannon that the Marcus mentioned. For a moment, Scopus suddenly had an idea. If he could build a steam cannon, or improve the arrow launcher in front of him. However, Leon did not notice the determination that flashed across Scopus' face. Because at this time, he was explaining to Hillman his understanding of the crossbow and steam engine. It must be able to fire continuously. Equip a small quiver on the top or side of the crossbow, and shoot arrows by pulling the trigger. Every time an arrow is fired, the arrow in the quiver needs to automatically fall into the launch slot, allowing the soldiers to fire continuously. In addition, for the steam engine you build, you can consider adding a condenser, that is, an external device that quickly cools water vapor into liquid. It may have an unexpected effect. I just mentioned it briefly before. If I describe it in more detail, maybe when I come here next time, the craftsman of Anatolia will bring me a bigger surprise. Leon has always believed in this. Chapter 140, Ximena Napiran Family. To be honest, although the first generation of steam engines in Anatolia looks a little lame, it is undoubtedly a good start. And Leon intends to add a fire to this foundation. This is a magical world after all. Countless magic factors are floating in the world, and ancient magic words are hidden in the classics. Although the magic of this era requires chanting spells to be cast, the ancient magic words are obviously not. Otherwise, how to explain the ancient magic words that need to be engraved on the shadow manipulator? Fortunately, the mage apprentices in Anatolia are in an oversaturated state, and it seems that it is not difficult to pick out a few open-minded ones. The only problem is how to make the arrogant mage apprentices bend down and get along with the craftsmen of Anatolia in the shortest time. However, since Anatolia now has the great mage Albert in charge, this only problem is actually not difficult to solve. It is difficult to change the life outlook of the mage apprentices, but it is not difficult to command the mage apprentices in the name of the great mage. As long as enough benefits are promised and enough subsidies are given. Leon believes that the magic engineering he has always dreamed of will surely bloom the most brilliant flowers and produce the freshest and juiciest fruits on this land on the edge of the kingdom. Therefore, with the cooperation of Master Albert, Antolia's research on magic engineering finally officially set sail after a group of craftsmen and several mage apprentices set up a makeshift team. The autumn in Anatolia comes and goes quickly. Leon only felt that he had just returned to Anatolia from the north of the kingdom not long ago, and the bitter cold wind of winter had returned to the land of Anatolia again. But this time, it is no longer the year of the jackdaw, and there will be no more hounds attacking the city. The barren land has become fertile black soil. Except for the black fog that keeps spreading towards the foot of the mountain, which makes Leon feel quite unhappy. This is enough to be called one of the few good years in Antolia's history. The improvement of the black soil has brought a lot of arable land to the fiefdom of the Ximena family. The 2 seasons of rice and food a year also gave the Ximena family, or Leon, more confidence. There was no way, the food was overflowing. If Leon could successfully solve the black fog that spread to the foot of the mountain next spring, then the field area and food production in Anatolia would undoubtedly usher in another surge. At the same time, the first batch of service fees paid by noble vassals had been transported to Leon's fiefdom, one after another. Therefore, even though the temperature had gradually turned cold, the construction of the new city on the west bank of the White Blade River had never stopped. Before this, the Antolians seemed to have not realized what kind of changes the construction site on the other side of the White Blade River would bring to their lives. But with the arrival of winter, the construction site that provided 2 meals a day suddenly became a hot commodity in everyone's eyes. So much so that not only the refugees, but also the native Antolians also actively participated in Leon's new city construction plan, just like last year's Thorn Territory Old House renovation plan, which was responded to by many people. In that construction site, a solid and huge foundation was being built bit by bit by the workers. There was the Pantheon of Anatolia, the largest shared apartment in history built by Leon, the most devout believer of the church, for the gods of Anatolia. Leon's study was filled with warmth, but there was no fire burning in the fireplace, but warm stones from the southwest highlands. Although Leon and the mages of Anatolia agreed that warm stones must have more important functions than simple heating, unfortunately, not much progress has been made so far. What he could expect was that when the ancient magic words hidden in the ancient books were mainly extracted, perhaps the warm stones in front of him could be given more uses. When the biting cold wind outside the window poured into the house through the gaps in the wooden windows, Aaron, the butler, knocked on Leon's door. "My lord Marcus." The old butler was wrapped in a thick bearskin coat, which made his figure look even more hunched. "Hurry up and sit down." Leon quickly pointed to the seat in front of the desk. He prepared it specifically for Aaron. Apart from this respected old butler, no one else in Antolia could sit in front of Leon calmly. It would be great if every winter was like this year. Aaron couldn't help but sigh. "It will," Leon assured confidently. "The soldiers of Antolia have already discovered the Baragori Pass connecting the southwest highlands and the abandoned land. Therefore, even if the year of the jackdaw comes again, the brave and warlike Antolians can make full preparations at the pass to block those highland hounds from Antolia. What's more, in Leon's plan, next year, or at the latest the year after, the army of Antolia will surely set foot on the abandoned land and bring the land that has not been visited by humans for hundreds of years under the control of the Ximena family. By then, the plateau hounds that have threatened Antolia for nearly 100 years will be forever blocked from the side of the Ximena family." "How did the old butler have time to come here?" Leon asked curiously. "You know, Aaron has been busy supervising the new city construction plan on the west bank of the White Blade River during this period of time. He is almost invisible all day long. If it weren't for Balo helping to watch the southwest highlands, he would have been too busy. Since he came to find me in person, it must not be just a casual chat. The children of the family's side branch have arrived." Family side branch. Leon was stunned at first, and then he realized what this so-called family side branch was. You know, although the direct descendants of the Ximena family are few in number, with only Leon as the only child, it does not mean that the family branch far away in a foreign country is the same. The kingdom of Andal is adjacent to the Duchy of Norman in the west and the kingdom of Walrus in the north. In the southeast of the Andal kingdom, there are 7 small kingdoms and principalities whose combined territories cannot catch up with the Andal kingdom. The Duchy of Dulin is one of them. As for the Ximena Napurin family, which holds the title of Viscount Napurin, it is a family branch separated from the Ximena family, and over time, it has become a vassal of the Duchy of Dulin. Of course, this is not a cliché that the side branch overrides the main branch of the family. In fact, for the Ximena family, although the relationship between the side branch and the main branch is not too close, they often have exchanges. After all, in this feudal era centered on the nobility, in many cases, family members with a common surname are often the most trustworthy allies. Even in the year of the jackdaw, the Ximena Napurin family living in the Duchy of Dulin has never sent less emergency food to Antolia. However, since the power of the Ximena family's side branch is not outstanding, even if there is food and grass transportation, it is difficult to fill the huge food gap in Antolia in the past. "Who is coming?" Leon asked curiously. "Your cousin, Mr. Philip." Chapter 141 Update. Subscribe to the rescue plan. This is not the first time Philip has come to Antolia. As Leon's cousin, he has come to this land in the south of the Andal kingdom several times in the past few years. But that was when Leon's father was still alive. Since Leon became the Lord of Antolia, this is the first time Philip has set foot on this familiar yet unfamiliar land. What surprised him was that after just a few years of not visiting, everything in front of him had completely changed. So much so that since entering the city, he has repeatedly confirmed his current location with the waiters beside him. Could it be that he has come to the wrong place? It must be said that compared to most cities of this era, even though the current Thorn territory is a little crowded due to the surge in population, it is completely different from most cities of this era. Or to be more certain, it is completely different from any city. This is naturally due to Leon's strict requirements for creating a civilized and hygienic city in Antolia. Fully fermented feces and urine can become excellent fertilizers, while dirty cities may cause diseases. Therefore, since Leon took office, the young lord has issued a series of laws that are completely incomprehensible to the people. For example, urinating and defecating anywhere in the city will be fined, and dumping feces in the city will be punished with labor. Although the people do not understand Leon's behavior, they fully understand the swords of the Antolian soldiers. Especially after Leon built a large number of public toilets and feces dumping sites in the city, the entire Thorn territory can be said to have a brand new look. So much so that Philip is not used to smelling the air in the city, which is not fresh but has no stench. And what shocked him the most was obviously not these. The population of Antolia is what makes Philip feel a little helpless. When did there become so many people here? Exclamation mark. Philip is difficult to understand, and he can't understand it at all. In his impression, the total population of Anatolia is only a few thousand people. But now, the construction site outside the city alone has gathered a population that he has never imagined. There must be thousands of workers on the construction site alone. Is the gap between the Marquis and the Viscount so big? Yes, although the Ximena Napson family is far away in the Duchy of Doolin, with the end of the civil war in the Andal Kingdom, the Ximena family's branch has also heard the shocking news from the Andal Kingdom. The patriarch of the Ximena family, Viscount León Ximena of Anatolia, was canonized as the Marquis of Anatolia by Wilbert I of the Andal Kingdom for suppressing the rebellion of the nobles. He replaced the former Bravis family and became the head of the southern nobles of the Andal Kingdom. God knows how shocked Philip was when he first heard the news. He is only 1 year younger than Leon. But now Leon has become a Marquis and has a title that he can only look up to. Could it be that Dad's sacrifice to this guy can really boost the family's fortune? Philip looked around, thinking something that was not quite true in his heart. But then, he shuddered all over, and hurriedly dispelled the slightly rebellious thoughts in his heart. He was a filial son. What's more, even if his father fell into the water, it would not be his turn to inherit the title. After all, he had 2 older brothers. It would be better to do as his father said and stay with his cousin for a while. Maybe he could get a title for himself. Anyway, we are all family. Although the relationship between the main branch and the side branch is not too close, there are a lot of exchanges on weekdays, which is at least much better than following other nobles. So, in the banquet hall of the Lord's castle, Philip finally met his dear cousin again. Wow! How handsome is my cousin again! Could it be that the title of Marquis will provide a very significant bonus to personal appearance? Looking at Leon's handsome face, Philip thought so. To be honest, the genes of the Ximena family are quite good, and they are basically handsome. Even if there is a guy like Philip who looks ordinary, he looks very impressive. Philip. Leon smiled and walked up to his cousin and gave him a big hug. Leon knew exactly why Philip came. But he didn't care. This was not entirely because Philip came with 7 or 8 young talents who knew how to read and write and were strongly recommended by Viscount Napson. It was also because he had dealt with Philip a lot when he first crossed over to this world. How should I put it? Although he looked ordinary, his cousin was quite calm when doing things, and he had even been a burden to himself before. At present, Anatolia is short of manpower. It is impossible to arrange these talents who came from afar to core positions, but at least they can share some of the pressure in some open work. Marquis of Anatolia. Philip's voice was slightly excited. As a member of the Ximena family, although he is only a branch of the family, he is willing to see the prosperity of the Ximena family. After all, even if Leon's current status is just a vassal, if he is placed in the small countries southeast of the Andal Kingdom, he must be a Grand Duke. Although Leon, as the Marquis of Anatolia, cannot directly affect the situation of the Duchy of Doolin, he can also add a lot of confidence to the branch of the family far away in a foreign country. This can be said to be a win-win situation. Eat first. Leon personally took Philip to the banquet hall and sat down. Steamed pike, braised bird legs. Looking around, in addition to some normal food on the plate in front of Leon, the dishes placed on the long oak table are almost all local specialties from Anatolia. Cousin, is there anything I can do? When the dinner was over, Philip asked without hesitation. The reason why he came to Anatolia was not simply to accept the hospitality of his cousin. Compared to eating these unpalatable foods every day, Philip wanted to do something for this land and improve his own abilities. Because compared to the Andal Kingdom, where a civil war in a kingdom can surprise the nobles for a long time, the 7 eastern kingdoms, including the Duchy of Doolin, have been in chaos and conflict for a long time since their establishment. It's true. Leon wiped the corners of his mouth with a handkerchief on the table and said with a smile, the gold mine in the sunken wood forest needs someone who is steady enough to keep an eye on it now. This chapter is updated this week and belongs to the August subscription rescue plan. It is an emergency rescue carried out by the author based on the plummeting subscription data after the war plot ended. Chapter 142. No way? Chen Muling really found gold? Exclamation mark. Leon's emotions about the sunken wood forest were actually somewhat complicated. In order to allow mercenaries from all over the kingdom to explore the way for the soldiers of Anatolia, with Leon's approval, the bard Jorni spread the rumor of the gold mine in the sunken wood forest throughout the kingdom. At the same time, in order to make the rumor more credible, the soldiers of Anatolia deliberately set up dozens of checkpoints around the sunken wood forest, claiming to provide convenience for the mercenaries going to the sunken wood forest, and confirmed that the Ximena family had the priority to purchase all minerals and harvests from the sunken wood forest. Originally, Leon's move was just to cooperate with the rumors spread by Jorni, so as to further enhance the credibility of the rumors. But what Leon had never expected was that with the arrival of winter and the arrival of mercenaries from all over the country, just a few days ago, someone actually took out gold and exchanged it with the Antolians. When this news was passed to Leon by the completely unprepared Antolian soldiers, he was shocked to the spot. "No way, is there really a gold mine in the sunken wood forest?" Exclamation mark. Just when Leon was wondering if this was an extraordinary performance by Jorni in order to deceive more mercenaries' trust, more and more mercenaries who entered the sunken wood forest took out broken gold nuggets from their dirty pockets. This was considered to be a complete confirmation of Leon's doubts, and it also completely detonated the adventurers of the entire Andal kingdom. There is indeed a gold mine in the sunken wood forest. Although when the rumor first started, many alert mercenaries had already realized that this news that suddenly came from the mouths of wandering poets from all over the country might be a false news. However, when someone really mined gold from the sunken wood forest, all of the adventurers who were originally very calm could not sit still almost in an instant. It's not a rumor? If it's not a rumor, why is it spread like a rumor? In just a week, the number of mercenaries gathered around the sunken wood forest ushered in the largest surge in history. Mercenaries from all over the Andal kingdom and even from the Principality of Norton gathered on the land of the sunken wood forest to participate in the event. Mercenaries fight for money. Now, there is gold waiting for them to dig in the sunken wood forest, so why go to the battlefield to risk their lives? Exclamation mark. What's more, according to the current situation of the Andal kingdom, it is probably that there will be no war that will sweep the kingdom again in 3 to 5 years. The top priority for adventurers is to quickly re-employ the unemployed mercenaries. And this also forced Leon, the Marquis of Anatolia, to reconsider his position on the sunken wood forest and his plan for the Viscount territory that he was in charge of. In fact, to be honest, Leon did not regret letting mercenaries from all over the world come to the land of Anatolia to participate in the event. After all, even if Leon had known that there was a gold mine in the sunken wood forest, he would have made the same choice. Perhaps because of his identity as a traverser, or perhaps because of his sense of responsibility as the Marquis of Anatolia, Leon would never let his soldiers, for those pieces of golden stones, leave their lives forever in the sunken wood forest guarded by tree men. Even if they die, the soldiers of Anatolia should die on the battlefield defending Anatolia. Moreover, although the adventurers who come to pan for gold can obtain a lot of benefits, Anatolia, as the host, will also make a lot of money, and may even make more than the gold diggers. And this is in the case that there is no danger to life. For example, merchants from Anatolia have set out a few days ago to buy all the shovels and spades in the southern part of the kingdom. At the same time, the dwarf craftsmen of the Anatolia ironworks also began to produce a series of civilian tools related to mining and handy weapons that may be favored by mercenaries in full salary according to Leon's requirements. You need a shovel for mining, right? Do you have to buy it in Anatolia? In addition, does the gold ore need to be exchanged for coins? But in this round trip, the Ximena family can make amazing profits. After all, as far as alchemy is concerned, it is normal to have some losses. At the same time, the nearest noble territory to Ximena is Anatolia, so after getting gold and making money, do you want to spend it in Anatolia? Those big and strong mercenaries are not ascetic characters, and it is in their nature to spend money when they make money. In short, as long as you decide to come to Ximena to mine, then your food, clothing, housing and transportation will definitely be inseparable from Anatolia. So much so that a large part of the money earned through mining actually has to flow back to Anatolia and return to the pockets of the Ximena family. Just like America's routine during the gold rush, those who can make a lot of money will never be those gold diggers who charge on the front line, but the Ximena family who made the custody of Ximena a fait accompli at the noble banquet a few months ago. So, seeing the gold diggers from all over the kingdom flocking in, although Leon was shocked on the surface that Ximena really dug out the gold mine, but in his heart, he had already been happy. The population is large and the consumption is high. The trade in Anatolia, which was originally better than nothing, will be able to develop. and those merchants with a keen sense of smell will certainly notice this piece of land on the edge of the kingdom for the first time, bringing unprecedented prosperity to Anatolia. Therefore, looking at Philip, who was eager to try, Leon said solemnly, "The gold mine in the sunken wood forest is the top priority of Anatolia now. I will let Aaron arrange some people to help you, and I will also let Andrew cooperate fully and provide you with a specific implementation plan. In short, you must grab the largest share of benefits for the Ximena family in this feast for gold diggers." Although cousin Philip is just a newcomer. However, Leon has full confidence in this young man who is even 1 year younger than himself. Why are the 7 eastern countries adjacent to the Andal Kingdom always in chaos? Isn't it because it is one of the most important gold mines in the entire northern continent? Since Philip has never dealt with gold diggers, this task is naturally the most suitable for his cousin. Moreover, with the strong military strength of the Anatolian army as a backing, Philip can certainly do much more than he expected. "Don't worry, my Lord Marcus." Philip looked into Leon's eyes very seriously and said with confidence, "If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelis. There you'll find the original version of this story, and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels." Chapter 143 Gold Rush? Emmer Cohen is a mercenary. To be precise, he is a mercenary from the Northern Mercenary Corps. However, with the end of the civil war in the kingdom, and the title of Earl Brondick of the leader of the Northern Mercenaries, Sharp Coil, was recognized by Wilbert I after the war. Emmer Cohen, a rookie who had just joined the Northern Mercenaries, was laid off without any surprise. In the name of sending young and strong mercenary talents to the Andal Kingdom. There was no way. After the surrender of the Duke of Sadwind Castle, Sharp Coil, the leader of the Northern Mercenaries, was in a very awkward position. Because the title of Earl Brondick was given to him by Pearl. In order to get the recognition of Wilbert I, Sharp naturally needed to show enough attitude. And obviously, Emmer Cohen was ruthlessly abandoned, and he didn't even get much severance pay. However, just when he was full of worries about his future life, the news from the south of the kingdom made him see another possibility and another way to make money. A gold mine was discovered in the south of the kingdom. In fact, compared to the caution of others, Emmer Cohen set out from the north of the kingdom as soon as he heard the news. It was not that he did not want to verify the authenticity of the news from multiple sources, nor was it that he did not know about the tree guards in the sunken wood forest. After all, after the Marquis of Anatolia frankly explained the threat in the sunken wood forest in the capital that day, all the nobles and mercenaries in the Andal Kingdom heard about those monsters that had only appeared in the legends of the bards before. The main reason was that his wallet was so dry that he could only hope for the authenticity of the news and gamble on his luck. And obviously, he won the bet. When he finally braved the cold wind of early winter, experienced all the ups and downs along the way, and wandered from the north of the kingdom to the south of the kingdom with a hungry stomach, the news of the existence of gold mines in the sunken wood forest had been confirmed. Countless gold diggers from all over the kingdom gathered at the edge of the sunken wood forest, intending to join the event on this land on the edge of the kingdom. So, Emmer Cohen easily joined this gold-digging team composed of abandoned sons of major mercenary groups and downtrodden nobles. In this complex group of gold diggers, there are not only rookies like Emmer Cohen who were swept out by the Northern Mercenaries, but also bandits from the Principality of Norton, downtrodden nobles from the east of the kingdom, and tough refugees who are unwilling to be silent. In short, everyone is an outstanding young man from the Andal Kingdom who is only interested in money. But Emmer Cohen was surprised to find that even though the heroes gathered here were all a group of violent guys, no vicious case had ever occurred in the few days since they came to the edge of the sunken wood forest. This is the territory of the Antolians. In the face of Emmer's doubts, the downtrodden noble from the capital gave the answer. Indeed, the reputation of the Northern Mercenaries resounded throughout the kingdom. But as the Antolian army marched northward and the news of the siege of the capital spread throughout the kingdom, the name of Antolian finally returned to the ears of everyone. The number of Antolian mercenaries may be small, but their bravery is obvious to all. What's more, with the arrival of Philip, the new chief steward of the Ximena family, and the release of the temporary management measures for the sunken wood forest area, trial, the mercenaries gathered here naturally dare not take advantage of it. After all, the management measures pointed out that if someone makes trouble in the sunken wood forest, all gold diggers can report it to the Ximena family. At that time, Not only will the reported person be warmly entertained by the Lapric core, but the gold that the reported person has found in these days will also be detained by Antolian and distributed to enthusiastic gold diggers in a 50-50 ratio. If this happened in other noble territories, this so-called management method might not work. But following Philip, it was the fully armed Lapric core. In many places in the Andal Kingdom, the Antolians are actually regarded as barbarians, even in the north of the kingdom. Some people even call the Antolians the walrus people living in the south of the Andal Kingdom because of their different beliefs. So, naturally no one would dare to give up the easy gold mining opportunity in the sunken wood forest and go to fight with the Antolian soldiers, especially after several gold diggers with cramps in their heads were knocked down by Antolian soldiers. Because everyone believes that the Antolian army led by Andrew, the commander of the Lapric Corps, will definitely send blessings from Antolia to the mercenaries who dare to make trouble. Of course, although the Ximena family implemented a high-pressure policy for the arrival of the gold diggers. But the benefits that should be given are not less. Especially considering that the gold diggers will always face the threat of treemen. The gold diggers who successfully kill or injure treemen can bring the branches dropped by treemen out of the sunken wood forest. Then the generous Marquis of Antolia will give extra rewards. Anyway, the gold diggers only know the value of gold, but do not understand the significance of the living wood dropped by treemen to Antolia. As the temporary manager of the sunken wood forest, Philip can completely rely on the existence of information gap to achieve the real purpose of his lord without spending a single soldier. In short, drinking, fighting monsters, and digging gold mines. Since coming to the south of the kingdom, this has become Emmer Cohen's daily life. And with the temptation of gold mines these days, gold diggers from all over the kingdom have been sending heads to the tree guards in the sunken wood forest day and night, and they have actually figured out some of the ways of the tree guards. In short, although those monsters called tree people are immune to magic attacks and can even withstand the burning of flames unexpectedly, they need a long time to cool down their skills every time they use their branches to attack. In addition, their movement speed is a bit slow, which gives the mercenaries the opportunity to dig gold here. It is for this reason that when the bard Jorni was in danger in the sunken woods, he had the opportunity to escape from the sunken woods. Therefore, according to the summary of the gold diggers, there are mainly two ways to pan for gold in the sunken woods. One is to find a warrior with thick blood and use the shield in his hand to resist the attack of the tree guard. The disadvantage is that the shield of poor quality is likely to cause the front row to die. The second is to find an unlucky guy with a taunting effect to attract the hatred of the tree people and provide the possibility for others to mine. However, the disadvantages of this method are also obvious. In the case of being unfamiliar with the situation in the sunken woods, the death rate of those gold diggers who are responsible for pulling hatred is as high as 33%. Set a flag, slow down today, and strive to add more tomorrow. Chapter 144 Holy Light. There is living wood. With the continuous efforts of the gold diggers, the special magic material that Leon thought would take a long time to obtain was delivered to Leon in just half a month along with the gold that was mined. Although the gold diggers suffered heavy casualties in the process, what Antolia had to pay was actually just a little money. After all, there was no such thing as work-related injuries in this era. What's more, the gold diggers did not realize that they were actually just working for the Antolians. What drove them to walk into the sunken wood forest regardless of everything was the gold that shone with the golden light in their eyes and could be exchanged for strong liquor, maids, wealth and status. And all Leon had to do was to sit back and enjoy the fruits of his labor in his study. He lit the candlestick on the table, opened the documents in his hand, and while browsing the magic books, he used the feather pen in his hand to outline the future of Antolia. However, although there was living wood, the ancient magic words had not made any progress. Or to be more precise, not much progress has been made in the direction of the magic runes related to the shadow manipulator. Because with the addition of a large number of mages and mage apprentices, more and more scattered ancient magic runes and magic books have been found by the mages of Antolia. Fire, ice, hurricane. Different ancient magic runes have different powers, and are also given different meanings and different patterns. This is a completely different way of casting spells from chanting spells. However, scattered magic runes are similar to scattered professional definitions. Although they have been excavated by mages, they have never formed a complete system. It was not until the Lapric priest fast that he looked through the drawings of the shadow manipulator for the first time at the invitation of Leon. As the spiritual leader of the Lapric tribe, Fast has an extraordinary emotion for returning to the abandoned land. He is more eager than anyone else that Anatolia can, under the leadership of León, reshape the land on the other side of the mountains into a place where humans can live. So, after countless days and nights of thinking, Fast provided León with a valuable idea, whether it is the same ancient magic rune or different ancient magic runes. In order to make them truly exert the power of magic, they need to be connected by magic rune circuits. Fast pointed to the symbol he copied on the craft paper and said very seriously, "The shadow manipulator needs the magic rune called purification as the core of the entire magic rune structure, but these magic runes with specific meanings have similar magic rune circuits to connect them and integrate them into one. The shadow manipulator is like this, and the stone tablet stored in the Laprik tribe is also like this." Just a few days ago, although León still had no idea about the purification magic rune required to create the shadow manipulator, the mages found a magic rune symbol that was very similar to the pattern on the Laprik stone tablet in the vast collection of books in the ancient archives. It was a magic rune called Holy Light. And this naturally made León feel very happy. Can the Laprik steel be repaired? León was very sure that the steel, which was treasured by the Laprik tribe, must be a creation of the ancestors similar to scientific instruments, shadow manipulators and other mechanical devices. Although León had never witnessed a function of the steel, he could infer from Fast's memory that it was most likely a device with defensive properties. "You can try." Fast nodded with a hint of excitement. "I hope that Marcus will be willing to help." Can Fast repair the Laprik steel by himself? The answer is of course yes. Similar to chanting spells, the most important thing to draw magic circuits is mental power. Because those seemingly complex magic circuits are actually not simple to draw. Only with extremely strong mental power can one withstand the huge mental shock in the process of drawing those special symbols. However, although Fast's mental power allows him to repair the steel by his own strength, León is the only lord of Anatolia after all. Since he decided to pledge allegiance to the Ximena family, Fast would naturally offer this precious opportunity to further win the hearts of the people. The old priest was very open-minded about this. Whoever can lead the Lapriks back to the abandoned land will be the eternal lord of the Lapriks. "I will." León nodded seriously. He has always been very satisfied with this priest from the Lapriks. It was because Fast led the Lapriks to take the lead that Anatolia officially opened up the key link of winning over the mountain people. So, a few days later, including the great wizard Albert, Collins, Kerman and other wizards of Anatolia all stood silently in the garden outside the Lord's castle. In front of them, a stone tablet more than 2 meters high stood in the center of the garden. In fact, no matter from which angle you look at it, the stone tablet in front of you is far from being tall. However, it was precisely this stone tablet, which was far from being tall, that brought an inexplicable shock to everyone's hearts. This was an inexplicable emotion. This stone tablet, which came from the creation of the ancestors and was regarded as a treasure by the Laprik people of all generations, seemed to contain the power that connected the ancient and modern times, and was endowed with an extremely heavy historical atmosphere. Even though this stone tablet did not emit any magical fluctuations, no one dared to ignore the patterns engraved on the stone tablet. In the past, they might have been like Albert, not knowing what it was, and did not know the true meaning of ancient magic. But after these days of immersion and baptism, ancient magic, this word, which was extremely unfamiliar to their ears in the past, left an indelible mark in the hearts of all the mages. Because they knew very well that the patterns engraved on this stone tablet were the ancient magic words that made them tremble, and they were connected through one magic loop after another to form the magic mark. At this moment, no one knew what would happen after their lord, León Ximena, the Marquis of Anatolia, repaired the damaged magic runes on the stone tablet. This also filled everyone present with curiosity. Standing in front of the stone tablet, León finally took a deep breath and opened his eyes that had been closed. This was actually not the first time León tried to draw a magic rune circuit. Before this, he had drawn it countless times on various stone tablets. But in any case, there will be a difference between simulation and actual operation. Besides, he only has one chance. This stone tablet has gone through many years of wind and frost, and the special stone used to cast the stone tablet also makes this stone tablet a unique existence in Anatolia. Therefore, he cannot fail, and he does not allow himself to fail. León rarely wore his lavender noble robe, but changed into a black round-necked robe that symbolized his identity as a mage. He reached out his hand and slightly pressed the brim of the wizard's hat on his head, as if hoping that this familiar and well-fitting wizard robe would bring good luck to his attempt. The damage to the magic loop on the stone tablet was not serious, otherwise, it would be impossible to repair the stone tablet with his current understanding of ancient magic. The young lord took a deep breath again, and finally slowly pulled out the sword in his hand from the scabbard. The so-called engraving is naturally not to write and draw on the stone tablet with a quill pen. Only by leaving clear and smooth marks on the stone tablet with the help of the sword tip in your hand can it be called engraving. With a crisp sword chant, the longsword in his hand was as smooth as piercing a thin piece of paper, and it was lightly nailed to the stone tablet in front of Leon. If it were another sword, it would naturally not be so light. However, the longsword in Leon's hand was blessed by enchantment, so that the hard stone used to build this stone tablet only made Leon's right hand holding the hilt feel a little resistance. This feeling is a bit similar to the feeling of resistance when the tip of a brush passes through rice paper. Leon's hand is very steady. He manipulated the tip of the sword that had already pierced into the stone tablet very lightly, and gently moved the sword in his hand after embedding it about a few millimeters on the surface of the stone tablet. Although theoretically speaking, even if the sword is sharpened on both sides, it is usually only used for stabbing. However, the sword after enchantment is naturally not comparable to an ordinary long sword. Beside Leon, the mages who were watching had already held their breath. They stared at the movements in Leon's hands intently, fearing that they would disturb Leon's operation, and dared not make the slightest sound. Even the cold wind blowing past their faces would raise their hearts to their throats. But at this moment, Leon obviously had no time to care about and guess everyone's thoughts. He was concentrating on the long sword in his hand, and put all his energy into the sword edge that was moving on the stone tablet. Yes, it is true that drawing the magic circuit does not require magic. But this is a great test of the spiritual power possessed by the painter. Gradually, the lines on the stone tablet that had become blurred due to the erosion of time gradually became clear under Leon's engraving. The fine and complex lines seemed to contain an invisible power. Although most of the magic circuit still maintained their original state after nearly 1,000 years, for Leon, who was practicing for the first time, even a simple repair would consume a lot of his energy. At this moment, if Leon's golden finger was a data panel, then there is no doubt that the data representing spiritual power would definitely decrease rapidly at a speed visible to the naked eye. As the magic circuit on the stone tablet became clearer and clearer under Leon's engraving, Leon seemed to enter a state of selflessness. In the eyes of the crowd, Leon seemed to be engraving a masterpiece of art that he had worked so hard on. Every movement of the sword tip would add a vivid touch to this artwork. It was almost done. Time passed inadvertently, and when Leon finally began to repair the last damaged magic loop, everyone present widened their eyes at the same time. At this time, it was the most difficult moment. Leon's mental power had reached the bottom, but the last magic loop had not yet been completed. But he didn't dare to think about anything else. At this time, Leon only knew that the stone tablet in front of him was the last treasure in the hearts of the Laprik people, and in a short time, there was no chance for him to come again on the land of Anatolia. Horizontal ellipsis. The sword tip still moved slowly on the stone tablet. The faint black mist gathered around the sword tip also appeared and disappeared with the movement of the sword tip. Finally, when the last magic loop slowly closed under Leon's engraving, in an instant, a light that no one had expected suddenly bloomed on this ancient stone tablet. With Leon as the center, the dazzling light instantly covered everyone's eyes, skipped the castle garden, and extended to the huge city. At this moment, Leon could not see anything except the vast white light. But his heart was extremely calm, because he did not feel the slightest threat in this white light that suddenly covered his face. On the contrary, the young lord only felt a warm feeling coming towards him. What happened? The sudden white light not only flashed across the eyes of everyone present, but also crossed the wall of the Thorn territory in an instant. The people in the city, the laborers on the construction site, the soldiers in the barracks, the craftsmen in the workshop, and even the hunters in the mountains and forests. Although compared to Leon and the mages who were closest to the stone tablet, the sudden flash of white light was just a fleeting moment in the eyes of the people, but everyone knew that the scene just now was not an illusion in their eyes, nor was it an illusion caused by excessive fatigue. Just now, a dazzling light flashed on the land of Anatolia. They looked at each other in confusion. When someone finally came to their senses and was about to ask, a pale golden, Hemispherical light curtain with twinkling stars gradually formed in the sky of Anatolia. It seemed to be a sacred and untouchable barrier with infinite power, from the eastern woodland to the southwest highlands, surrounding the entire Anatolia. Miracles. The Anatolians did not believe in gods. However, those refugees who were packed up and taken to Anatolia by their families because of the war in the kingdom firmly believed in the existence of gods. So, when they looked at the hemispherical barrier shrouding the sky, the refugees were filled with endless shock and piety. I will try to update later. But my classmates are coming to play tomorrow, so I have to prepare tomorrow's manuscript in advance. I will see if I can write it. If there's an update, I will post it before 12 o'clock. Chapter 145. Stay calm and don't waste time. The warm sun of early winter shone through the pale golden light curtain covering Anatolia, and spread across the city. The cool breeze blew up the yellow fallen leaves on the ground, swept over the dust on the ground, and slapped on everyone's robes. Albert raised his head and looked at the scene in front of him with his straight eyes, extremely shocked. After the eye-catching white light flashed, the whole of Anatolia was covered by the pale golden light curtain in the air, which was completely beyond his cognition. As a great wizard, Albert had not felt this confused for many years. Before this, he felt that even if he could not be said to be a master of ancient and modern studies, he basically understood magic and everything related to magic. However, everything that happened in Anatolia refreshed the cognition of this great wizard again and again. First it was the potion, and then the magic runes. And now, with these magic tools called ancient magic runes and magic rune circuits by the Anatolians, under his own eyes, Anatolia was shrouded in the light curtain in front of him. Ancient magic. Albert knew that he should change his slightly old-fashioned and conservative ideas. After all, on the special magic path of ancient magic runes, even a great wizard like him is just a beginner, and there is no difference between him and the wizards of Anatolians, and even the wizard apprentices. Is this the original stone tablet? Compared with Albert, who doubted his life, as a priest of the Laprik tribe, Fast was shocked in his heart. The Laprik people have guarded this old stone tablet for many years. At least before becoming a vassal of the Ximena family, the use of this stone tablet was extremely simple, that is, to keep the wild beasts in the mountains and forests away from the Laprik camp. And now, under Leon's personal operation, the Laprik people's stone tablet has finally been restored and glowed with a brilliance that has never been seen before. My Lord Marcus. For a moment, the old priest burst into tears. He knelt down in front of Leon. For every Laprik living on this land, this stone tablet has a very special meaning and a very special emotion. At this moment, Fast was extremely grateful for his original decision. If he had not agreed to Leon's proposal, and had not resolutely led the Laprik people to pledge allegiance to Leon, then, this stone tablet in front of him would probably have been covered in dust for many years. Get up quickly. It was not until Fast knelt down with a plop that Leon came back to his senses from his previous shock. He quickly helped the priest up. The Laprik tribe is also part of Anatolia and is a subject of the Ximena family. As the lord of this land, Leon has an obligation to do so. Put this stone tablet here for the time being and send Laprik warriors to guard it day and night. After the pantheon on the other side of the White Blade River is completed, I will place this stone tablet in front of the bear otter totem of the Laprik tribe. Thank you for your gift. Fast said excitedly. But how long can this light curtain last? Looking at the light curtain above his head that gradually became blurred from clear, Leon couldn't help but ask hesitantly. Yes, the repair of the magic circuit went very smoothly. The barrier with flashing light also enveloped the sky above Anatolia. But this thing can't be a disposable prop, right? Exclamation mark. If so, then before using it every time, do I have to run over and engrave the magic circuit again? You know, just now in order to repair the magic circuit on the stone tablet, I spent more than an hour. Warmstone. Facing Leon's question, Fast immediately gave the answer. The ancestors of the Laprik tribe once mentioned that this stone tablet needs to be driven by warmstone. This is also the reason why the tribe members were sent to the southwest highlands to dig warmstone. However, since the magic circuit on the stone tablet had long been broken, the warmstone dug was useless except for heating, so I thought it was because the time was too long and the successive priests conveyed the wrong message when they handed it over. Fast said, a little embarrassed. In this case, Thorn territory has a city defense formation. Hearing Fast's words, Leon's mood suddenly improved a lot. More than that, Albert, who had been silent for a long time, took over and said, according to the previous scale of this light curtain, if its coverage is limited to one place in Thornton territory, it may be enough to withstand the magic attack of the Great Wizard level. Hearing this, Leon couldn't help but widen his eyes. In terms of conventional military strength, Antolia is not afraid of any opponent. But if we talk about the top magician level, there is only Albert in the whole of Antolia, which is also slightly inferior to the Bravis family in its heyday. Now, with this light curtain in front of us, Antolia has made up for the lack of top magic power, and the price to pay is just the warm stones that can be seen everywhere on the Southwest Highlands. Thinking of this, Leon's mood is naturally very comfortable. Marcus. There is no doubt that the successful restoration of the Lapric stone tablet has injected a shot of adrenaline into the mages who originally doubted the ancient magic runes. Just as the mages in the Lord's Garden were conducting a fierce discussion on the follow-up research on the ancient magic runes, Stein led a group of mercenaries and hurried over. Obviously, the mercenary leader of Antolia realized the unusualness of the previous time, and saw the light bursting from around the Lord's castle, so he naturally came to see the safety of his lord. It's okay here. That light curtain is just a magic barrier to protect Antolia's safety. Magic barrier. After a moment of daze, Stein's face suddenly became extremely excited. Since Antolia has such a powerful barrier, can Antolia's mercenaries go out? No. Before Stein finished speaking, Leon stepped on the brake without hesitation. As a lord, Leon naturally knew Stein's temperament very well. Although the civil war in the kingdom has just ended, Stein has always been a guy who can't sit still. He must want to do some business outside. If it were a normal day, Leon might still agree. But now, when the shadow manipulator is completed, it will be the time for the Antolia army to set foot on the abandoned land. It will naturally not let people go at such a critical time node. Hold steady, don't waste time. Wait until the beginning of next spring, there will be plenty of opportunities to go to the battlefield. Thanks to Novel Love Book for the reward. Chapter 146. The Earl of Greywater Castle feels that he is too smart. In the spring of next year. When Leon's voice fell, Fast's eyes suddenly widened. In his eyes, this is undoubtedly a very special time node. The civil war in the Andal Kingdom has ended, and the entire kingdom has ushered in precious peace. However, León Ximena, the Marquess of Antolia, said that in the spring of next year, Antolia's mercenaries will have the opportunity to reward the battlefield? Exclamation mark. For a moment, Fast seemed to realize something, so that his body couldn't help but tremble. Because he thought of a possibility. That is the abandoned land on the other side of the mountains. Exploring the abandoned land is a top secret in Antolia. Although the Remitrascal Red Devil Potion, that is, the preparation of the little red bottle, requires the use of red smelly grass from the abandoned land, whether the abandoned land should be developed, and what is on the other side of the mountains. This question is still a mystery on the land of Antolia. So looking at the whole Antolia, except for Leon, there are only a few people who know about the exploration plan of the abandoned land. And Fast, the priest of Lapric, is one of them. This is the promise that Leon made to the elderly priest of Lapric when he was gathering the mountain people. But, at that time, Leon was still an ordinary border viscount, and the Ximena family had not yet emerged in the Andal Kingdom. So in Leon's promise, the date he gave was not actually next year. Within 3 years, cross the continuous mountains. Within 10 years, look at the ruins of Yalin from afar. This is the original words that Leon promised to Fast in the letter. Note, Chapter 26. Now, the spread of black fog has forced Leon to put the creation of the shadow manipulator on the agenda, and the exploration of the abandoned land can naturally be accelerated. Fast never thought that Leon would have a preliminary consideration of exploring the abandoned land in such a short time. In the spring of next year. At that time, the Lapric people must rush to the front. What Antolian mercenaries and Antolian militias must stand back. No matter what is in the abandoned land, no matter what kind of threat the Lapric tribe will face, returning to the land where their ancestors once lived has always been the long-cherished wish of the Lapric tribe's priests. And obviously, Stein was also shocked by Leon's words. The only difference is that Stein doesn't know why he will have the opportunity to go to the battlefield in the spring of next year. But since the Marquess said there is, there must be. Stein has never doubted the words of his lord, let alone got to the bottom of it. Yes, Stein said without hesitation. Anyway, the purpose of his coming here is purely to brush up his presence in front of his lord, in case Leon forgets him. Therefore, What Leon said was a complete surprise for Stein. Hurry up and train. Practice hard for me. There will be a war next year. On the way back, Stein said to the mercenaries beside him with great interest. Standing on the wall of Greywater Castle, the heart of Greywater Castle, Earl Eli Wayne was actually very complicated. As the earldom closest to Antolia, when Antolia not far away was covered by a translucent hemispherical light curtain, the squire knights loyal to the Wayne family brought this explosive news to Eli Wayne. When he walked up to the wall of Greywater Castle with his round belly, the light curtain covering Antolia had not yet completely dissipated. How many cards did the Antolians hide? After being covered in the cold wind of early winter, the round earl finally couldn't help muttering. During this time, he had indeed decided to hold Antolia's thigh tightly, and to welcome the newly promoted largest noble in the south of the kingdom with a brand new mentality and a fine loyal posture. It was for this reason that the thoughtful earl did not hesitate to sign a series of new business agreements with the young Marquis from Antolia. From moonlight velvet to Antolian ironware, from regular living supplies to important strategic resources. Taking advantage of the unique location of Greywater Castle, Eli Wayne did not hesitate to become a middleman for Antolian goods, trying to make the Wayne family an import and export distributor of Antolian goods. In order to achieve this goal, he even took the initiative to extend the mercenary agreements signed with the Antolians in the cold winter of last year and started outsourcing the city defense. Because he had already thought it through. Greywater Castle is so close to Antolia, and the young Marquis is very open-minded to cooperate with him regardless of past grudges. There is really no need for him to jump up and down and make small moves. In addition to retaining the family guards directly under the Wayne family, it is better to spend money to let the Antolian army take over the city defense of Greywater Castle. In this way, if there is something wrong with the Greywater Castle, it is equivalent to something wrong with Antolia. Using the money originally used to hire militias to hire the Antolian army, in this way, the Wayne family's rule over Greywater Castle may be more stable under the shadow of the Ximena family. It was under the guidance of this idea that, looking around the inside and outside of Greywater Castle, except for the Wayne family's Lord Castle, the guards shuttling through the city walls and streets were all reserve mercenaries from Antolia. However, when he saw the light curtain rising from Antolia, the Count of Greywater Castle thought that he was a little too conservative before. The former Duke of Galicia was indeed awesome, and the former Bravis family was indeed powerful. But didn't they still become nothing but ashes under Leon's combination of punches? Calendar. Eli Wayne turned around and looked at the silly boy standing behind him. He finally made up his mind, and then said very seriously, "I want to recommend you to be León Ximena's Knight Squire." It was actually a very common thing for the sons of nobles to serve as waiters beside the great nobles in this era. Not only can they show their loyalty to the Lord, but they may also allow their silly boy to have a good relationship with the future Lord. If they can be valued by the Lord, then it is undoubtedly a very valuable opportunity. Therefore, this was not a decision made by the Count of Greywater Castle on a whim. Of course. I've wanted to go for a long time. Upon hearing this, Calendar Wayne immediately agreed with great interest, as if he was afraid that his father, the Count, would go back on his word. The tough style of the Antolians is very contagious. As a little fan who once went north with Leon, Calendar Wayne had already heard countless anecdotes about Antolia from the Antolian soldiers. In addition to the huge bird legs he saw at the banquet and the hound jerky he was given before leaving, Calendar did not feel any resistance to his father's decision. He had wanted to go to the Southwest Highlands to hunt birds for a long time. It's just that. Looking at his eldest son's eager attitude, the Count of Greywater Castle suddenly became a little hesitant. This kid shouldn't cause any trouble after arriving in Antolia, right? Chapter 147. Leon's ideas are always too advanced. Looking at the young Marquis sitting in front of him, Aaron's mind was actually a little complicated. Because his lord's thinking was often too advanced, so he often felt that although he was the steward of the Ximena family, he could not always catch up with his lord's overly jumpy thinking. For example, what is a bank? Why should others deposit the money they have worked so hard to earn in the hands of the Antolians? However, after listening to his lord's extremely meticulous thinking, Aaron had to express his admiration for his lord's wonderful ideas. In fact, to be honest, running a bank in this era sounds a little nonsense. In this era, there are not even a few free people, so how can anyone go to the bank to deposit money? The nobles are obviously the richest group of people in the Andal Kingdom. But wouldn't it be better for them to hide their money in the vault of their lord's castle? Why should they send their money to other nobles? Regardless of whether it was safe or not, if he really did this, wouldn't his background be known to other nobles? So before this, even though Leon had similar considerations in his mind, they were only fleeting, and he did not hesitate to extinguish unrealistic ideas such as banks. However, with the prevalence of the gold rush in the southern part of the Andal Kingdom, Leon saw a possibility. The gold reserves in the sunken wood forest are extremely astonishing. Although many people were killed by the tree guards, more people really found gold in the sunken wood forest. But the problem is, they can't always carry the gold they found in the sunken wood forest with them, right? It is definitely not safe to leave it in the camp. There are all kinds of gold diggers who come to the sunken wood forest to pan for gold, and who knows which one will consider doing some petty theft. But if you carry it with you, then if you die in the sunken wood forest, wouldn't you return all the hard-earned gold? At this time, it is extremely important to have an institution with sufficient credit and capable of storing the wealth of the gold diggers. Perhaps if a gold digger is singled out, he will not have too much money in his hands. But if all the gold diggers deposit their gold in the bank controlled by the Ximena family, then Leon will naturally be able to earn a storage fee from it. Yes, from beginning to end, Leon has never considered the issue of interest rates. What a joke. The Ximena family helps you keep the gold, and you actually want to earn interest? First, collect a storage fee according to the amount of deposit. In Antolia, where there is almost no trade, Leon is really forced to collect money and mortgages on one hand, so naturally he has to make up some profits from the gold diggers. What's more, if Leon gives interest, maybe the gold diggers who originally wanted to save money will not dare to save. Think about it, a noble who eats people without spitting bones, help you keep your money, and give you money from time to time. Who dares to believe such a good thing? So, this is not because Leon is greedy at all. He really just wants to take on his responsibility as the Lord of Antolia and do a little bit of good for the adventurers who go to the sunken wood forest to pan for gold. He is really great. So, under Leon's repeated instructions, in the township-level CBD that gathers most of the bakeries, stalls, taverns and hotels in Thornton territory, a financial institution called Antolia United Bank was finally officially established. Here, can I save money? When Emmer Cohen walked into the store along the street with a lot of doubts, he looked around with a little trepidation and asked uncertainly. As a group of people who eat crabs in the southern part of the kingdom, although Emmer is just a small fish swept out by the northern mercenaries. But it seems that he has put all his luck on panning for gold. In just half a month, he actually found more than 30 escudo gold coins under the threat of the tree guards in the sunken woods. When he found the first gold, Emmer Cohen was excited. When he found the third gold, Emmer Cohen's heart was burning. But when the value of the gold he accumulated in the sunken woods gradually exceeded 30 escudo gold coins, he only felt a hint of worry. Thefts are frequent in the camp. Although sometimes those petty thieves can be caught, more often they can't be caught at all. With such a large fortune, but for safety reasons, he can only carry it with him. Emmer Cohen's mood can be imagined. So, when he came to the land of Antolia and planned to purchase a few brand new shovels, the sign of Antolia Bank, which had just been hung, immediately attracted Emmer's attention. He didn't know what a bank was, but at least he could understand the billboard at the entrance of the bank, Antolia Bank, your private vault. And behind the advertisement, there was even the emblem of the Ximena family. Private vault. This is exactly what Emmer Cohen needs now. It was for this reason that Emmer Cohen walked into this bank that had obviously just opened. It must be said that after entering the door of this bank, the interior decoration was extremely unique. Although there was not even a candle in the hall, the fluorescent grass-potted plants planted in the flower pots brought bright light to this visitor hall. The big eyeballs of the tall bird were set in the center of the hall, as if it could see through the purpose and demands of the visiting guests with just one glance. In the face of Emmer's question, the bank clerk, who had already received simple training, immediately gave a positive answer, of course. But according to the amount of wealth you store, we will charge a certain share of the custody fee. Emmer paused for a moment and said hesitantly, if I want to deposit 30 escudos, 50 Andal silver coins. The bank clerk smiled professionally and gave a standard answer, 50 Andal silver coins. This is the fee you need to pay for custody for 1 year. During this period, you can withdraw it at any time. Can it be guaranteed safe? Emmer asked the question he was most concerned about. Of course. The bank clerk pointed to the Ximena family emblem engraved on the door with great confidence. "The fierce mercenaries from Anatolia will defend your wealth to the death." I typed it on the way. If there are typos, please call me. There are no more today. Chapter 148, Viscount Cummings falls into self-doubt. The cold wind of early winter seemed to slap the faces of the civilians, leaving them slightly red and swollen. It was at this time that the city of Parma welcomed its new lord, ending its short history as a royal territory. With the brilliant merit of lifting the siege of the capital, Leon had already cut a piece of the enviable cake before the end of the civil war in the kingdom, becoming the largest noble in the south of the kingdom. With the end of the civil war in the kingdom, the other nobles who supported Wilbert I finally received rewards and gifts from Wilbert I one after another when the cold winter came. Of course, it was not just the nobles who supported Wilbert I who were to be rewarded. Even among the nobles in the north of the kingdom, several key figures also had a share. However, the so-called reward given to the northern nobles was not a real honor, but was filled with political considerations made by Wilbert I and his staff. Since he had announced that he would no longer hold other northern nobles accountable, he naturally had to show his openness and magnanimity. However, this did not mean that he would not split up the small groups of northern nobles from other aspects. Under the attack of the Southern Coalition, the Eastern Coalition that surrounded the capital was defeated. Not only did the third Prince Helson disappear, but the nobles whose fiefdoms were located in the eastern part of the kingdom also suffered heavy losses. This naturally created a large number of unowned fiefdoms in the eastern part of the kingdom. By promoting the title or replacing the fiefdom, the northern nobles who were originally a solid block were relocated to various corners of the kingdom. This naturally became a consideration made by Wilbert I after careful consideration. For example, as the first northern noble to surrender, Viscount Cummings was very honored to become the new Lord of Parma. In fact, Viscount Cummings thought this was good news. After all, Parma was once the fief of the Bravis family. Even if the wealth of the Bravis family had nothing to do with him, in his impression, this city had the largest population in the southern part of the kingdom and was considered one of the most ownerless places. However, just when he came to the south of the kingdom for the first time with his servants, full of expectations in his heart, he felt bad. Yes, Parma was still standing there. The towering walls, the wide city gates, the vast fields, the rushing rivers. Everything was no different from what he expected. Even outside the city, the wizard towers standing in the city could be seen from afar, with their square spires piercing straight into the misty clouds. Wilbert I was a benevolent monarch, a magnanimous king. He would lead the Andal kingdom to a more glorious tomorrow. Before entering the city, this was the most real thought in Viscount Cummings's heart. So much so that there was a little haziness in his eyes. There was no way. Although he was only a viscount, he and the leader of the northern mercenaries, Sharp Coil, were the right-hand men of Pearl, the Duke of Sadwin Castle, in the previous rebellion. The northern mercenaries, led by Sharp Coil, marched straight to the Valley City. The western rebels, led by Viscount Cummings, made the nobles in the west of the kingdom dare not act rashly, providing a stable rear for the rebellion of the Duke of Sadwin Castle. But even so, Wilbert I still forgave him and even made him the new Lord of Parma City. How could he not be moved to death by such an enlightened new king? However, Viscount Cummings' good mood did not last long. Especially when he led his servants through the wide gate of Parma City, the gratitude that finally emerged from his heart came to an abrupt end at this moment. The reason was simple. Although the appearance of the city did not change much, the interior of Parma City was horrible enough. Looking around, there was hardly a single intact house in the city, and the streets were all burned by the fire. Even the streets under his feet were full of potholes, as if they had been turned over by someone with a shovel. As for the huge population he had originally expected, do the old, weak, and disabled people who were sitting on the roadside due to lack of food and clothing count? You know, the population in this city was not only packed up by the mercenaries of Anatolia, but even the streets and houses in the city were completely looted and plundered by the Count of Brabant, who came later. No, 3 times. Although the soldiers of Anatolia had never done anything that would anger the heavens and the people under the strict military discipline, their main goal had always been to pack up the population in the city and empty the treasury of the Bravis family. But this does not mean that the private armies of other nobles were all like this. In the window period after the withdrawal of the Anatolia army, not only did the private army of the Count of Brabant come here to plunder, but even the other nobles near the city of Parma also did some immoral things. So when Viscount Cummings stepped into Parma, This northern nobleman who came from afar was not only in deep self-doubt. Is this Parma? Is this really the Parma that was once ruled by the Bravis family? Exclamation mark. Where are the population? Where are the houses? Why does everything that comes into my eyes after entering the city seem to be no different from ruins? There are differences between cities. No matter how large the scale of this city is, no matter how impressive the wizard tower in the city is, it is useless without enough population and enough food. What happened here? Viscount Cummings turned his head blankly and looked at the equally stunned waiters standing behind him. However, his question was destined to be unanswered. Everyone was a foreigner who moved from the north of the kingdom. Who knew what the situation was in the south of the kingdom? And even if they knew that the city was originally captured by the Antolians, the people present would blame everything in front of them on Wilbert I. You didn't give me a title among so many nobles, but you chose to give me a title in such a ruined place with a good reputation, but almost no resources? Even if Wilbert I said that he didn't know about the masterpiece of the southern nobles, I'm afraid Viscount Cummings might not believe it. Wilfred of a bitch. Viscount Cummings' eyes were bloodshot and he couldn't help cursing. I had something to do today and went out. I will try to code the next chapter before 12 o'clock. If I can't code it, I will make it up tomorrow. Chapter 149. Leon seemed to see a piece of fat meat delivered to his door. I am in a foreign world, just arrived at my fiefdom. The people are exhausted and there is a shortage of food. What should I do? Wait online? Urgent. The above is the most realistic psychological state of Viscount Cummings now. When everything in front of him just came into view, Viscount Cummings' heart was quite broken. But when he finally took a deep breath, forced himself to stabilize his mind, and after a calm, comprehensive and detailed consideration, the most outstanding viscount among the young generation of northern nobles became even more broken in his heart. What should I do? There is no way. The Andal kingdom is located in the north of the continent, so even in the south of the kingdom, it is extremely cold in winter. And what Viscount Cummings has to face now is not only a city like a ruin, but also the old, weak and sick people in the city who are not clothed. Cold, not clothed, and there is a shortage of food. During this cold winter, even if Viscount Cummings has no doubt about his ability, at this moment, he will involuntarily produce an irrepressible decadence and irritability in his heart. Yes, as a viscount, he does have a lot of wealth. But it will take a long time for the wealth originally stored in the north of the kingdom to arrive. Moreover, even if he has money, he still needs to buy food. The golden coins are indeed enviable, but in the case of food shortage, those riches are just a pile of hard waste. Especially after the civil war in which he was deeply involved and affected the entire Andal kingdom, the trend of food prices in the Andal kingdom has long been like a magic, climbing straight up. Damn Wilbert I. Viscount Cummings couldn't help but curse again. However, no matter how irritable the curse is, it can't change the reality that Viscount Cummings has to face now. Therefore, just when the Viscount was at a loss, a waiter standing behind Viscount Cummings finally recovered from his previous shock and provided the young Viscount with valuable advice. Do you want to ask the Marquis of Antolia? The Marquis of Antolia, León Ximena. Viscount Cummings was not unfamiliar with this name. Because in the western part of the kingdom at that time, it was Leon, who had become the Marquis of Antolia, who accepted his surrender on behalf of Wilbert I. He was a lord, nobleman and excellent military commander who was even younger than himself. Not only was he the most loyal minister in the eyes of Wilbert I, but he was also the most powerful noble in the southern part of the kingdom. When Leon's name reached his ears, Viscount Cummings finally felt a hard-earned hope in his heart. Even before that, he and Leon were in a hostile relationship. But isn't the civil war over? Since his fiefdom was transferred from the north to the south, and his identity was seamlessly changed from a northern noble to a member of the southern nobles, dealing with Leon became an inevitable link in the eyes of Viscount Cummings. What's more, Viscount Cummings actually had a good impression of Leon. Although he was just a defeated general in a strict sense, Leon did not humiliate him like ordinary nobles, but talked with him for a long time, which greatly reduced the psychological pressure of Viscount Cummings after surrendering. Even though Viscount Cummings had calmed down and realized that the Marquis of Antolia must have done something to Parma, he still decided to go to Antolia. In the decision made by Cummings, 1/3 was based on the situation in Parma, 1/3 was out of personal emotions, and the other third was based on the complex relationship between the southern nobles. So in his eyes, even though Leon had become the largest noble in the south of the kingdom, But there are still many nobles in this land who have had good relations with the Bravis family. Compared with these people, even though he was born in the north, he would definitely be more favored by León than those people. Even if León is not his vassal, it would definitely not be a bad thing to have a good relationship with a Marcus, right? It was also adhering to this idea that 3 days later, in the Lord's Castle of Thorn territory, following the trembling old butler who walked in front and led the way, Viscount Cummings finally met the young Marcus again. León Ximena. My Lord Marcus. Viscount Cummings greeted respectfully. I haven't seen you for several months. My Lord Marcus has become more heroic. Tisk. Look at this man, how good he is at telling the truth. As the saying goes, don't hide a smiling person. Moreover, León had roughly figured out the purpose of Viscount Cummings's visit, so he smiled and said, I didn't expect Viscount Cummings to become the new Lord of Parma. I hope we can visit each other more often in the future. I wonder if Viscount Cummings came to visit Antolia just after arriving in the south. What happened? To be honest, León's rhetoric was actually a bit of a knowing question. The population of Parma was packed by León. The wealth of the Bravis family was emptied by León. Even the plunder of the Count of Brabant in Parma was tacitly approved by León. Similarly, Viscount Cummings also knew that León knew his purpose, but he still pretended that he didn't know that León knew his purpose. Because he had no choice. Even if the news of this era was so closed, with the convening of the noble banquet a few days ago, the fact that Antolia had a large tract of farmland had long been circulated in the southern part of the kingdom. Compared to other nobles, the Marcus in front of him is obviously the noble who is most likely to take out food to help him through the difficult times. The only question is, what price do I have to pay? I do have something to ask for. Viscount Cummings said frankly, after the civil war in the kingdom, the city of Parma has almost become a ruin. It is winter now. You are the most powerful noble in the south of the kingdom. I hope that the Marcus will not hesitate to help and provide food and financial support for the reconstruction of Parma. Since they talked about business at the beginning, León's eyes naturally became formal. The Ximena family does own Antolia. But you are not a vassal of the Ximena family, so theoretically speaking, I have no obligation to help you. Besides, everyone knows that Antolia is poor and desolate. Even if I want to help you, I am afraid I am unable to do it. Barren? Desolate? Viscount Cummings couldn't help but smile bitterly. Of course he knew that León was lying with his eyes open, but he had something to ask of him, so he had to say, as long as the Marcus is willing to help me rebuild Parma, I am willing to pay enough. Hearing this, León's eyes flashed with light. Because he seemed to see a piece of fat meat delivered to his door, waiting for his slaughter. Today's Parma really has no oil to be squeezed. But this does not mean that there will be no oil to be squeezed in the future Parma. Damn, I've written it out. I will try to add more tomorrow, and the day after tomorrow at the latest. Chapter 150. Aaron's admiration for the Marcus grows. At the moment when he finished speaking, Viscount Cummings suddenly felt a panic. Although León's face was quite kind and his eyes were full of sincerity, he just felt a panic rising from the bottom of his heart for no reason. Since Viscount Cummings said so. León paused, and there seemed to be some hesitation in his voice. We are all nobles in the south of the kingdom now, and we are all vassals of Wilbert I. Antolia should indeed do its best to stabilize the south of the kingdom. Hearing this, Cummings' mind finally calmed down a little. He was not afraid that León would ask for a big price, but he was afraid that León would not agree. Because in his opinion, León, as the Marquis of Antolia, was probably the only southern noble who could help him now. Moreover, no matter how much León wanted to ask for a big price, the city of Parma had already become that ghost. How outrageous could it be? As long as León dared to ask, Viscount Cummings dared to give it. Even if León's eyes were on the wealth accumulated by his family for generations, he would still dare to give it. Because Viscount Cummings believed that even if the current Parma city was no different from a ghost town, it was undeniable that it was a city with an extremely advantageous geographical location. Not only was it located at a transportation hub, but it also had this vast arable land. As long as he was diligent enough, he would definitely be able to have a place in the south of the kingdom, and even take his family to a higher level. I wonder what the Marcus needs. Thinking of this, Viscount Cummings took the initiative to ask. It depends on how much help you want to get from Antolia. You also know that the Ximena family has always been kind to others, and they pay the most attention to convincing people with reason, and will never cheat their neighbors. León said very generously. Food, clothing and money. Viscount Cummings gave a cautious answer: food and clothing don't have to be a lot, as long as they can support the people of Parma City until the autumn harvest next year. As for the money, it is used to rebuild the collapsed houses in Parma City. Yes, Viscount Cummings did have a considerable fortune. But compared with the wealth needed to rebuild the city of Parma, it was far from enough. In his opinion, since the Marquis of Antolia got the biggest piece of the pie in the process of distributing the wealth of the Bravis family, he should have more money. However, the facts were not as he thought. There is no problem with food and clothing, but there may be some minor problems with money. In response to Viscount Cummings' request, Leon said, when arriving at the Thorn territory, the Viscount should have seen that a new city is being built on the west bank of the White Blade River. This has also stretched the wealth of the Ximena family, and I'm afraid they can't come up with enough money all at once. Besides, the Ximena family is the most devout believers of the church, and they plan to build the largest church in the history of the southern part of the kingdom there. For such a massive project, Antolia can't even pay the tithe, so how can it support the reconstruction of Parma? But Leon paused and continued, if conditions permit, the Ximena family can consider providing loan funds for the reconstruction of Parma through the Antolia Bank. The only problem is, you, Viscount Cummings, what can you put up as collateral? Collateral. Viscount Cummings was stunned, confidently savoring the meaning of Leon's words. Although the Marquis said a lot, his meaning was quite straightforward. He wanted money, but the Ximena family was not well off, so they could not do a loss-making business. What the Marquis meant was, the taxes of Parma City for the next 20 years, the funds for rebuilding Parma City, and the wealth of the Cummings family must be deposited in the Antolia Bank opened in Parma City. The real estate and title deeds available for trading in Parma City must also be used as collateral. At the same time, all the materials needed to rebuild Parma City, as long as Antolia has them, must be purchased from Antolia. After a brief conversation, Leon finally showed his true colors and offered his conditions to the Viscount, who came from afar. Of course, the excuses such as the shortage of funds caused by the construction of the new city are nonsense. In Leon's view, although the gold rush now has provided the newly born Antolia Bank with a suitable soil for survival, sooner or later, the gold rush will subside. If Antolia Bank wants to gain a more lasting vitality in this land, it must get the support of the nobles and have sufficient and lasting business support. Obviously, the reconstruction of Parma City gave Leon such an opportunity. As long as Viscount Cummings dares to agree, then at least in the next few decades, the Ximena family will surely gain unparalleled influence in Parma City. Not to mention the movements of the Cummings family, even what Viscount Cummings does every night, maybe Leon can know it clearly. And this is not the most important thing. What Leon values most is actually the second condition he offered. If money cannot be circulated, then it is of no use at all. However, for Antolia today, the only place where money is needed is the new city on the west bank of the White Blade River. Even if Leon wants to spend the money in his hands outside the territory, he can basically only frame the scope of investment in the south of the kingdom, which is determined by the collection ability of the Antolia army. Therefore, if the workshops and workers of Antolia can get a share of the reconstruction process of Parma, it will definitely be a good thing. On the one hand, the Antolia Bank earns interest by lending, which is the direct benefit that the Ximena family can get. On the other hand, Viscount Cummings purchased materials on the land of Antolia through the loan obtained from the Antolia Bank, and the people living on this land could also benefit. This is a win-win situation. Antolia wins twice. Aaron, who was standing aside, was stunned. He thought that his Marquis just came up with the Antolia Bank on a whim. But he didn't expect that there would be a backup plan? Exclamation mark. With such foresight and such a pattern, why can't the Ximena family worry about not being able to revitalize? However, faced with the conditions offered by Leon, Viscount Cummings hesitated after all. Even though he had thought of countless possibilities before. But no matter how he imagined it, he never thought that this young Marquis had already set his sights on the future of Parma City. End of this chapter. Thank you very much for reaching the end. Don't forget to like. Looking for more exclusive content and immediate access? Subscribe to our Patreon. Remember, every like, subscription, or donation encourages us to continue. Thanks to everyone. See you in the next video.